Chapter 873. If the younger generation of the veteran factions and pinnacle factions had been worried about Lin Yuan's situation, then they were extremely surprised now. Heavens! Lin Yuan can't be a humanoid fae, right? How did he send such a huge giant lava tiger flying with a single punch without getting burned? Even if the left guard official can't feel the actual temperature of the blazing flames with a shield, the reincarnation flame beast is a Diamond X/Fantasy 3 source-type lifeform. The key is that this elemental source-type lifeform evolved from the source fire and was nurtured by Lord Zhongzhe. A series of exclamations echoed in the Night Dawn Palace's outer palace. The area with the most exclamations came from the pinnacle faction's Rhine lifeform, Xing, who was in the circle of the younger generation of the pinnacle factions and veteran factions. None of the younger generation members brought by their families to participate in the Nyx assembly were not geniuses. All of them had suppressed their male peers in the faction they belonged to, and their families had poured a lot of blood and sweat into them. Even if these geniuses were usually pursued by men, they could not help but show their girlish feelings when facing men who were more outstanding. It could be said that the most eye-catching people in the Night Dawn Palace's outer palace were on the martial and civil arenas. Regardless of rank and status, it could be said that the top two in the civil and martial arenas were more valuable than the first and the first in the civil and martial arenas. Lin Yuan and Zhongzhe's looks were also top-notch, and they each had their own merits. Zhongzhe was wearing red half-body armor, and his stern face was filled with battle fanaticism and wildness. Lin Yuan was usually calm, and the beauty contained in his sunny smile could definitely dazzle people's eyes. Coupled with the fresh natural aura on his body, these 24 or 25-year-old geniuses could not help but want to rub Lin Yuan's head. Big Sister Xing, I didn't expect Lord Zhongzhe to suffer a small loss at the beginning. Xing immediately denied it. A casual test at the beginning of this duel can't prove anything. Zhongzhe's strength is not just this. Although her voice sounded coy, her tone was very serious. Xing then recalled that 2 years ago, when she was a healing-type spirit chi professional, she had been invited by Gu Lang to help with a mission in a Class 3 swamp dimensional rift. Before participating in the mission, Xing knew that the purpose of the mission was to capture a snake Medusa. For a dimensional creature like Medusa, no matter how much its grade increased, it was still a half-human dimensional creature. Spirit chi professionals couldn't contract ordinary dimensional lifeforms, but some dimensional lifeforms that had undergone special mutations could be contracted by spirit chi professionals. The snake Medusa was a dimensional lifeform that could be contracted by spirit chi professionals. When the swamp dimensional lifeform, Medusa, had evolved into a snake due to an unknown mutation. It looked roughly the same as an ordinary snake species fae. However, the snake Medusa had inherited all of Medusa's abilities. It was both powerful and rare. At that time, Gu Lang had placed great importance on this snake Medusa, but who would have thought that this snake Medusa's bloodline was abnormally powerful? Before transforming into a snake, it was already at the pinnacle of Class 3, and the ceiling of the swamp dimensional rift had faintly reached the standard of a suzerain. After transforming into a snake, the Medusa was no longer a dimensional lifeform. Hence, the Medusa's strength exceeded the pinnacle Class 3 swamp dimensional rift standard. It still wouldn't be repelled by the dimensional rift or cause the dimensional rift to evolve. This was 2 years ago, and at that time, the snake Medusa's suzerain strength wasn't something that she could contend with. At that time, Xing seemed to have seen a firework that could topple the world. Thousands of flames condensed in the air, and a bright red flash flashed. The suzerain snake Medusa was directly burned into a half-charred state. Finally, Gu Lang stored it in a fey storage box. That was the first time Xing had been shocked by the strength of a peer. From then on, Zhongzhe could be said to have become Xing idol. However, even with Xing vision, she couldn't understand how he had such a strong flame resistance. Even if Zhongzhe hadn't exerted his strength, just the temperature emitted by the Diamond X/Fantasy 3 reincarnation flame beast's flames was not easy to deal with. This flame could cause absolute instant death damage to fays below Diamond/Fantasy breed. Even if fays of the same grade as the reincarnation flame beast were roasted by this flame, It was impossible for them to be unscathed. As a creation master, Xing Yin could be sure that Lin Yuan was not a Fey and did not have a Fey bloodline. This was because Lin Yuan didn't have that kind of phase aura at all, nor did he have a beast pattern. It could be said that Lin Yuan was a pure human spirit qi professional, which proved that the strength he was displaying now was all provided by his contracted Fey. It should be one of Lin Yuan's Feys that bestowed him with fire resistance and that shocking strength. Xing Yin couldn't see too much at once from the collision just now. At that moment, Xing Yin heard her little sister's voice again. Big sister Xing Yin, I announce that Lin Yuan will be my darling from now on. Lin Yuan's action of turning over in the air and landing on the ground just now was too cool. Upon hearing that, Xing Yin's pupils shrank, and she finally realized what was wrong. Lin Yuan's strong flame resistance and monstrous strength could be said to be provided by Feys. However, Lin Yuan's combat skills and movement techniques were definitely his own. Could it be that this young Lin Yuan was also a martial arts prodigy? In the era of the Spirit Qi awakening, it was a very stupid thing to spend time honing combat skills and movement techniques. The veteran factions and the top faction's younger generation outside the arena exclaimed one after another, but it didn't affect Lin Yuan and Zhong Zhe, who were standing on the arena at that moment. Although Zhong Zhe would be affected by misfortune during combat and become a battle maniac, it didn't mean that he was irrational. On the contrary, Zhong Zhe's spirit would be highly concentrated during combat, and his mind would become more flexible. When Zhong Zhe launched an attack on Lin Yuan, he knew that Lin Yuan would definitely be able to withstand it. However, he didn't expect Lin Yuan to withstand it in this way and even counterattack. Zhong Zhe liked the feeling of standing next to Lin Yuan and the faint fragrance on his body. Coupled with Zhong Zhe's love for combat, Zhong Zhe felt that it was simply a kind of immortal enjoyment to be able to duel with Lin Yuan. At the same time, Zhong Zhe also became 120% serious and looked at Lin Yuan. Since you said that this kind of flame strength is still far from enough, then the fire is going to heat up soon. The first time was even more intense. End of this chapter. Chapter 874. After saying that, Zhong Zhe ordered the squeaking orange mouse on his shoulder. Sky-burning roar, use flame conduction. After saying that, the little orange mouse's body suddenly ignited with a fiery light, and 2 orange flame marks appeared on top of the little orange mouse's head. One appeared on the reincarnation flame beast, which was struggling to get up after being knocked down by Lin Yuan. In an instant, the temperature on the arena rose, and even Lin Yuan suddenly felt the pressure of this temperature. Sweat immediately seeped out of Lin Yuan's body. However, it was not that Lin Yuan could not endure such heat, and he was not the slightest bit afraid or worried about the sudden increase in heat. Lin Yuan did not use the Princess Silk Dress's function to activate the Myth 3 Ice Flame Law engraved in it and the Gilded Flame Dragon Lyce's Burning Flame Law. Lin Yuan's current fire-type resistance was only a passive bonus of the Princess Silk Dress. After using true data to check the attributes of the Sky-Burning Roar and the Reincarnation Flame Beast, Lin Yuan decided not to activate the fire-type law engraved in the Princess Silk Dress to increase his fire-type resistance. Due to the Reincarnation Flame Beast, he and Zhong Zhe were destined to have a protracted battle. Fortunately, Lin Yuan was now a B-rank Spirit Qi professional. If he was still a C-rank Spirit Qi professional, he would be 1 rank lower than Zhong Zhe. Then Lin Yuan could only use his ultimate move in this battle. In Lin Yuan's opinion, this battle was also a test of his strength. Not only had he not trained many of his trump cards, but he had not even used them. As a result, Lin Yuan did not have a clear understanding of the strength of his trump cards. This was not a good thing for a Spirit Qi professional. Zhong Zhe's Reincarnation Flame Beast had evolved from the Source Fire, which was similar to his contracted Source Sand. They were both elemental Source-type lifeforms. However, according to true data, the preconditions for the Source Fire and Source Sand's contracts were very different. The Source Fire had devoured a large number of metal spiritual ingredients and relied on the liquid metal to form a viscous lava-like body. The huge tiger-shaped Fey that had just formed from the lava-like body was the ability of the Reincarnation Flame Beast after it used Beast-type attachment and activated the Tiger-type Fey bloodline in its body. At that moment, the giant lava tiger, whose fire-type ability had increased, roared and charged at Lin Yuan again. Just like how Zhongzhe had not unleashed his full strength, Lin Yuan's earlier punch was just a probing attack. The exclusive skill, Spirit Purity Burst, was to gather spirit chi at one point to burst out with damage. The purer the spirit chi was, the higher the spirit purity burst damage would be. The spirit chi in Lin Yuan's body had reached a certain purity. This time, Lin Yuan wasn't stingy with his spiritual power. He circulated a large amount of spiritual power and gathered it on his left fist. Lin Yuan's body reflexively reacted, and his nimble movement technique coupled with tricky angles allowed him to dodge the giant lava tiger's flaming attack. Lin had. And the Lin Yuan Flame Giant Flame Tear. Lin Yuan's merciless blow completely destroyed the lava giant tiger's form. The powerful explosive force penetrated the lava giant tiger's body and blasted a hole with squirming liquid lava. At that moment, the giant lava tiger roared furiously. A lava antelope with a sword's horn came out of the hole and charged at Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan's right fist seemed to have predicted the future. It had long gathered spiritual power and struck the lava antelope's horn. The reincarnation flame beast's lava antelope was blasted away. The deformed giant lava tiger and lava antelope split again and formed a lava cheetah. Lin Yuan knew that this was the result of the reincarnation flame beast's beast-type attachment and the exclusive skill, flame differentiation. With flame differentiation, as long as the reincarnation flame beast had enough beast-type Fey bloodline, it could continuously offset the damage. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and let his muscles relax. Immediately, he tensed up and leaped high into the air, waving his fist to attack. Lu Jie, who was very familiar with Lin Yuan, could not help but swallow his saliva. He did not expect Lin Yuan, who was usually sunny, to be so fierce when fighting in this way. Zhongzhe paid great attention to Lin Yuan's attack. Although the reincarnation flame beast could offset the damage with its exclusive skill, flame differentiation, Zhongzhe could feel the damage from Lin Yuan's punch. However, even if Zhongzhe commanded the reincarnated flame beast's giant lava tiger, lava antelope, and lava cheetah to dodge his fists, the reincarnated flame beast's giant lava tiger, lava antelope, and lava cheetah Lin Yuan would still use his nimble movement technique to chase after them and attack them. As for the giant lava tiger, lava antelope, and lava cheetah, Lin Yuan easily dodged them with his movement technique. Lin Yuan was not affected by the scorching flames, and the reincarnation flame beast's beast-type individual could not cause an effective physical attack on him. This gave Zhongzhe a headache. Lin Yuan was like a slippery catfish. A series of exchanges happened in the blink of an eye. When Lin Yuan punched a lava rhinoceros, it turned into an irregular lava body and did not split into a new individual. Lin Yuan smiled brightly and said, "It seems like your reincarnation flame beast has absorbed a total of 8 beast-type phase bloodlines. It seems that your reincarnation flame beast has absorbed a total of 8 types of beast-type phase bloodlines." While speaking, Lin Yuan's attacks were still very clean. During the battle, he landed a punch on each of the giant lava beasts. The 8 irregular lava bodies fell on the combat arena's ground and rolled, but they could not condense into a beast form. They were obviously seriously injured. Lin Yuan's spiritual power had also been depleted during the earlier fight. It could be said that Lin Yuan's spiritual power had dried up. Not only did Lin Yuan's punches land on the reincarnated flame beast's body, but they also seemed to hit the hearts of the top and veteran faction's younger generation in Yeong Palace's outer palace. At this moment, the noisy outer palace of Yeong Palace was dead silent. Everyone looked at Lin Yuan as if they were looking at an indescribable miracle. Zhongzhe looked at Lin Yuan's grave and stern face with a hint of a smile amidst the fanaticism. He was not worried about the reincarnation flame beast's injuries at all. Each of your punches will consume about 1/20th of a B-rank spirit chi professional's spirit chi. You have a total of 21 punches, so your body should be out of spirit chi now. Reincarnation flame beast, use reincarnation fire. At that moment, the orange mark on the orange mouse on Zhongzhe's shoulder became brighter. The body of the reincarnated flame beast that had been marked with an orange mark also ignited with a thin layer of orange flame. There was still one more night, so it would be later. End of this chapter. Chapter 875. The moment the orange flames ignited, the lump of lava that couldn't take shape immediately transformed into a giant lava tiger. With a roar from the giant lava tiger, the other 7 lumps of lava shot toward the giant lava tiger and fused into its body. It was as though all of Lin Yuan's previous attacks had been useless. Lin Yuan swung his fist. He had been nurturing phase and had not had the chance to exercise. Now that he had punched out, he felt refreshed. Upon hearing Zhongzai's words, Lin Yuan replied softly, "You're right. According to the total amount of spirit qi, my body's spirit qi should have dried up after 21 punches." As Lin Yuan spoke, it was as though a seal had been opened on his body. Majestic spirit qi flowed out of Lin Yuan's body and set off a gust of wind on the stage. All of a sudden, Zhongzai felt his spirit qi circulation speed being suppressed. Zhongzai frowned and looked at Lin Yuan in disbelief. It's spiritual pressure. When spirit qi was stimulated, the spirit qi professional's body would produce external pressure. However, even a Class A spirit qi professional's spirit qi burst would not be able to produce spiritual pressure that could be felt by others. Right now, Zhongzai could clearly feel his spirit qi being suppressed. Zhongzai could not imagine how much spirit qi was circulating in Lin Yuan's body. Due to Zhuaming's barrier, no one could sense Lin Yuan's spiritual pressure apart from Zhongzai, who was fighting Lin Yuan on the stage. However, Zhongzai's words were clearly heard by everyone present. Lin Yuan had considered the pros and cons before activating the spirit qi imprint in his body. Just the sacred source lifeform reward for winning the civil and martial arena was enough for Lin Yuan to activate the spirit qi imprint that he had not used for a long time. Moreover, the civil and martial arena reward was a radiant medal. Today, Lin Yuan was going to let go of everything and fight with all his might. Zhongzai felt the change in Lin Yuan's body and immediately gave the Reincarnation Flame Beast a new order. Reincarnation Flame Beast, use Beast Vein Fusion. Following Zhongzai's order, the Reincarnation Flame Beast that had just transformed into a giant lava tiger turned into an irregular lump of lava again. The magma ball wriggled rapidly, and as it wriggled, it grew larger and larger as the fire elemental energy burned. Finally, it condensed into a giant beast with the characteristics of 8 phase. The moment the giant beast condensed, it pounced straight at Lin Yuan. Since Lin Yuan had removed the spirit qi imprint, he had plenty of spirit qi to squander. This time, he didn't conserve it and gathered a massive amount of spirit qi on his fists. This caused his 2 arms to be vaguely wrapped in materialized spirit energy, and the wrapping of spirit energy caused the air around his fists to become distorted. However, just as Lin Yuan rushed toward the Reincarnation Flame Beast that had gathered 8 types of Fey bloodlines, he clearly felt the temperature of the Reincarnation Flame Beast's flames rising. If he still did not activate the princess's dress at this time, what awaited him would be a large area of burns on his body. Thus, when he rushed toward the Reincarnation Flame Beast, he quietly activated the princess's skirt. After Lin Yuan activated Princess Luo Kun, he felt as though he had returned to the feeling when he had just ascended to the combat arena. He couldn't even feel the heat in the surrounding air. This made Lin Yuan involuntarily sigh in his heart. As expected of the myth 3 law power, just as Lin Yuan collided with the Reincarnation Flame Beast that had gathered 8 types of Fey bloodlines, he heard Zhongzai shout, "Reincarnation Flame Beast, flame body boil." Zhongzai had also contracted a sacred source life form, so when Lin Yuan activated Princess Luo Kun, he could faintly feel the sacred source aura emerging from Lin Yuan's body. Zhongzai wasn't surprised, as he had already guessed that Lin Yuan had contracted a sacred source life form. The fact that Lin Yuan had used a sacred source life form so quickly made Zhongzai feel at ease. Zhongzai would then use his creation master ability to investigate Lin Yuan's sacred source life form's functions. Following Zhongzai's command for flame body boil, the Reincarnation Flame Beast's fire elemental energy suddenly spewed out, but Lin Yuan was still unaffected. However, The reincarnation flame beast seemed to have turned into a hedgehog as it spewed out a large amount of tiny lava balls from its body. These tiny balls of lava cooled in the air, forming all kinds of weapons that were burning red hot. Seeing this, Lin Yuan jumped back and abruptly pulled away. Then, he used all kinds of strange movement techniques to move around in the rain of weapons, occasionally swinging his fists. In such a rain of weapons, Lin Yuan could be said to be unscathed. At that moment, Lin Yuan didn't notice anything strange. However, everyone, including Zhong Zhe, saw a faint image of a woman appear on Lin Yuan's body. This woman's image was nearly 10 meters tall. The woman in the image had her eyes closed, and her skirt fluttered in the wind. She stretched her arms forward as if to hug Lin Yuan. The woman's image made a gesture of wholeheartedly protecting him. The appearance of this woman's image broke the temporary peace in Yeong Palace's outer palace. This is definitely a fucking sacred source life form. Could it be that this sacred source life form allows Lin Yuan to be unscathed in this rain of weapons? After a series of exclamations, the younger generation spectators in Yeong Palace's outer palace began to discuss among themselves. Gu Lang and Xing Yin were deep in thought. Both of them realized that they couldn't rely on their creation master strength to investigate the sacred source lifeform's abilities. All prying eyes seemed to be blocked by the thousands of strong and weak forces on the sacred source lifeform's body. The sacred source lifeform's aura could not be blocked by Zhuiming's barrier. Gu Lang could confirm that Lin Yuan's body definitely had the sacred source lifeform's aura that had just appeared. However, Lin Yuan's fire elemental resistance and exquisite movement techniques had already been displayed. He didn't just summon the sacred source lifeform. Unlike Gu Lang, who was deep in thought outside the battlefield, Zhong Zhe, who was inside the battlefield, had already seen Lin Yuan dodge the rain of weapons. Then he summoned a fairy source-type lifeform with azure blue flames on its body. The moment the fairy source-type lifeform appeared, the azure flames around the fairy suddenly retracted. Finally, it gathered in the gem on the fairy's forehead. At the same time, the reincarnation flame beast used the reincarnation ritual and activated its second exclusive skill, Lava Demon God, that had been sealed. The reincarnated flame beast seemed to have turned into a volcanic crater, continuously spewing out lava. Strange beastly shadows appeared from the lava from time to time, and they continuously bombarded Lin Yuan's half of the stage. While the reincarnation flame beast executed its exclusive skill, Lava Demon God, to attack indiscriminately, the azure blue gem on the little fairy's forehead that Zhong Zhe had just summoned suddenly shot a gorgeous ray at Zhong Zhe. It didn't give Lin Yuan any time to dodge, and he couldn't dodge in the rain. But the next scene made Zhong Zhe's jaw drop. Lin Yuan, who had been hit by all the moves, was unharmed, but the fairy source-type life form, the blue venom flame puppet, that he had just summoned, was severely injured after launching its attack. Its spirited blue eyes lost their luster, and the two pairs of wings on its back stopped flapping. It fell from the sky onto the dark crystal floor of the stage. The third time. End of this chapter. Chapter 876. Zhong Zhe was stunned for a moment when he saw the blue poison flame puppet's blue eyes lose their luster and the two pairs of wings on its back no longer flapping. Then, his pupils constricted as he looked at Lin Yuan. The fairy source-type life form, the blue poison flame puppet, could be said to be a special offense-type source-type life form that Zhong Zhe had always valued. The azure blue flames on the blue poison flame puppet's body contained an extremely large amount of fire poison. The fire poison could immediately fill the target cells with fire elements and evaporate the water in the cells, causing the target to be in a dehydrated state. The fierce fire poison would burn the dehydrated target into charcoal. At the same time, the blue poison flame puppet was also very good at spiritual attacks. What the blue poison flame puppet had shot through the gemstone in its forehead was its spiritual power attack ability, the Blue Rose Ray. However, after the Blue Rose Ray hit Lin Yuan, the blue poison flame puppet had suffered a backlash from releasing the Blue Rose Ray, and its spiritual power had been severely injured. This was why the blue poison flame puppet had immediately entered a near-death state after releasing an attack. A spiritual backlash would only occur when an individual with weaker spiritual power attacked an individual with stronger spiritual power. Zhongzhe's fairy source type blue poison flame puppet might only be Diamond 8/Fantasy 2, and its grade and quality were not as high as the reincarnated flame beast. However, as a fire and spiritual type fairy source type life form, the blue poison flame puppet's spiritual power was more than 3 times that of the reincarnated flame beast. By relying on its spiritual power, the blue poison flame puppet could easily severely injure the reincarnated flame beast. In order to have such a strong backlash, Lin Yuan's spiritual power had to be at least 5 times higher than the blue poison flame puppet. However, in Zhongzhe's opinion, as a spirit chi professional, Lin Yuan's spiritual power could not be so strong. If Lin Yuan had such a strong spiritual power, he could contract hundreds or thousands of fays and nurture them. In that case, Lin Yuan only needed to summon all his contracted fays during the battle. Who could beat him if they ganged up on him? Such a huge spiritual power had already violated the upper limit of the human genetic model's spiritual power talent. At the same time, the moment the fairy source type blue poison flame puppet attacked, its spiritual power would connect with Lin Yuan's spiritual power as the blue rose ray hit him. The moment it connected with Lin Yuan's spiritual power, the blue poison flame puppet entered an unprecedented state of fear. It was as if the blue poison flame puppet, as a subordinate, had unknowingly offended its superior. Zhongzhe's contracted blue poison flame puppet was in existence with an extremely noble bloodline among fairy source type life forms. From the moment it hatched, it had 2 pairs of wings on its back, which meant it had 4 wings on its back. Apart from the rumored myth breed that had grown a 3rd pair of wings, the blue venom flame puppet's bloodline could be said to be the pinnacle of fairy source type life forms. Even Zhongzhe's own master, Chef Supreme, had said that if the blue venom flame puppet continued to be nurtured, there was a high chance that it would grow a 3rd pair of wings. Fairy source type life forms were a kind of rather special life form. When facing dragon species pressure and phoenix species pressure that came from phase bloodlines, they had a very strong resistance. In fact, it could basically ignore the phase bloodline pressure. However, when it came to the fairy bloodline, the fairy source type life forms with a high bloodline had a strong control over the fairy source type life forms with a low bloodline. In the previous battles, Zhongzhe had many advantages in this aspect. Zhongzhe secretly guessed in his heart, could Lin Yuan have a fairy source type life form with 3 pairs of wings? After having this thought, Zhongzhe felt that it was rather nonsensical. Lin Yuan was now a B-rank spirit chi professional. Even if his contracted phase upper limit was the same as Zhongzhe's, it would at most be a Diamond X/Fantasy V Fei. In history, he had never heard of a fairy source type life form below myth breed being able to grow 3 pairs of wings. Zhongzhe's master, Chef Supreme, had done a lot of research on fairy source type life forms, so Zhongzhe knew the importance of a fairy source type life form's bloodline more than anyone else. If Lin Yuan really had a fairy source type life form with 3 pairs of wings below myth breed, its value would be even more precious than an uncontracted sacred source life form. Not only that, but Zhongzhe could also determine that Lin Yuan had a very strong resistance to poison based on how unscathed he was. Fire poison damage was completely different from fire damage. One was poison damage that evolved from fire elements, while the other was pure fire damage. Ever since Zhongzhe had become a combat class spirit chi professional, he had never felt so depressed in a duel. As a spirit chi professional with an affinity for fire, Zhongzhe's contracted phase were all fire-type phase due to the limitations of his talent. After his specialty, fire-type attacks, was restricted, Zhongzhe changed his attack method and suffered a greater loss. After Zhongzhe probed Lin Yuan's sacred source life form, he realized that his life as a creation master seemed to have been in vain. This was not the first time Zhongzhe had tried to spy on someone else's sacred source life form. He had even been able to get a glimpse of his Chef Supreme's sacred source life form. However, Lin Yuan's sacred source life form had been blocked by thousands of strong and weak energies, so he could not even get a glimpse of it. Zhongzhe secretly guessed that Lin Yuan's resistance to spiritual damage was very likely due to his sacred source life form's ability. Unlike Zhongzhe's grave expression, Lin Yuan had a strange expression as he looked at the blue poison flame puppet that was on the verge of death. Zhong Zai's attack just now had not been the slightest problem. The combination of moves had reached a near-perfect level. Even if Lin Yuan had extraordinary combat skills and movement techniques, he would still not be able to dodge it. The mistake was that Zhong Zai had used a spiritual attack on him. As a functional Fey, genius did not have any combat abilities. However, it had massive spiritual energy that could memorize all the knowledge in the world. Such spiritual energy was not something that one or two spiritual-type phase attacks could shake. Lin Yuan's spiritual energy and genius spiritual energy were connected according to genius spiritual expansion ability. The blue poison flame puppet's spiritual attack had only caused a small wave in Lin Yuan's spiritual sea. The waves did not roll far before they silently melted into the sea. Lin Yuan did not feel the fire poison damage from the blue poison flame puppet's blue rose ray. If he had known that the blue poison flame puppet's attack contained fire poison damage, Lin Yuan would definitely thank himself for upgrading his Myth 2 Vicious Poison Law to Myth 3. Zhong Zai's sudden attack had allowed Lin Yuan to indirectly destroy one of Zhong Zai's Feis, which was definitely good news for Lin Yuan. First, even better. End of this chapter. Chapter 877. The younger generation of the veteran and peak forces were also stunned by this sudden turn of events. He did not understand why Zhong Zai's fairy source-type life form would be so heavily injured. Seeing this scene, Gu Lang's expression became more and more solemn. Gu Lang took a deep look at Lin Yuan, but the more he looked, the more he felt that Lin Yuan was shrouded in layers of fog, making it impossible to see him clearly. The blue poison flame puppet was a fairy source-type life form that Zhong Zai had contracted and nurtured in the past 2 years. Gu Lang had fought Zhong Zai a few times and had suffered quite a bit at the hands of the blue poison flame puppet. Gu Lang's thorny problem had become Lin Yuan's method to restrain Zhong Zai. Through this unforeseen event, Gu Lang also came to the same conclusion as Zhong Zai. He felt that Lin Yuan's sacred source life form's function was related to spiritual energy protection. With a wave of his hand, Zhong Zai recalled the dying blue venom flame puppet and the reincarnated flame beast into his spiritual space. At that moment, the blue venom flame puppet had entered a near-death state and could no longer fight. The lava demon god state's reincarnation flame beast was also immune to Lin Yuan's attacks. Allowing the reincarnated flame beast to maintain its lava demon god state would only waste the spiritual energy in Zhong Zai's body. After recalling the blue poison flame puppet and the reincarnation flame beast back into the spiritual spatial zone, Zhong Zai looked at Lin Yuan and said, "That's right. You are very strong. However, I am going to use my ultimate move." Zhong Zai's tone did not become heavy because of the battle. Instead, it was filled with a sense of joy. This was something that even Zhong Zai himself did not feel. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan replied with a bright smile. "Just like you, I'm going to use my ultimate move." As he spoke, he looked at the sky-burning centipede on Zhong Zai's shoulder and could not help but feel a little regretful. Under true data, the burning sky centipede's platinum skill, Group Flame Heart Flame, was a skill that targeted the mind and soul. Standing on Zhong Zai's shoulder, the sky-burning Ho did not join the battle. Instead, it cast a support skill, Flame Conduction, on the reincarnated flame beast. He speculated that this heaven-burning centipede should be one of Zhong Zai's trump cards. If the burning sky centipede were to use the platinum skill group Flaming Heart Flame on him, it would be countered by Lin Huang's mental strength. No matter how strong the burning sky centipede was, he would be eliminated. This way, he could directly destroy one of Zhong Zai's trump cards. With the lesson of the fairy source-type life form, the blue venom flame puppet, Zhong Zai would probably not let the burning heaven centipede use the group Flame Heart Flame on him again. However, this was also good. This burning sky centipede's existence could let him deeply feel how powerful the young generation's pinnacle strength was. At that moment, Zhong Zai turned around and said to Zhuoming, "Senior Zhuoming, the attack will be out of my control, so I'll have to trouble you." Zhuoming's expression became even more serious. "Lord Zhong Zai, I will take good care of the situation in the arena. I will act immediately according to my judgment." The first half of Zhuo Ming's voice was normal, but in the second half, his voice changed. It had a hoarse and cold quality to it. Lin Yuan and Zhong Zhe didn't sense the change in Zhuo Ming's aura because of the barrier. However, the younger generation of the top factions and veteran factions outside the arena felt as if a new world was quietly born in Yiyang Palace's inner palace. This newly born world was filled with desolation, as if all living things in this world were about to decay and decay. When they looked at Zhuo Ming again, they realized that Zhuo Ming, who originally had a human appearance, had a thick layer of earthen yellow armor. Fine and sharp thorns grew out of the armor, and a long tail curled up to the top of Zhuo Ming's head appeared behind him. Just by looking at this thick and long tail, one could feel the terrifying power contained within. It was as if the power of the tail could shatter the desolation world that had quietly descended in Yiyang Palace's outer palace. Although Lin Yuan couldn't feel Zhuo Ming's aura, he noticed the changes on Zhuo Ming's body. Upon seeing Zhuo Ming's transformation, Lin Yuan immediately knew that Zhuo Ming had a fae that could possess him. Lin Yuan had seen spirit qi professionals with faes that could possess them before, and Exen Ying was one of them. Upon seeing Zhuo Ming's transformation, Lin Yuan let out a sigh of relief because he was about to use an unpredictable power. At that moment, Lin Yuan heard Zhong Zhe give an order to the Burning Sky Centipede. Burning Sky Centipede used the exclusive skill, Exceptional Flame 8 Refinements. Upon hearing Zhong Zhe's order, the Burning Sky Centipede on Zhong Zhe's shoulder suddenly leaped into the sky. With this leap, golden bristles grew on the Burning Sky Centipede's body that looked like an orange rat. After these golden bristles grew, they immediately ignited with 8 different colored flames. Immediately after, the 8 flames entered the Burning Sky Centipede's mouth as it sucked in all of a sudden. Immediately after, the 8 colored flames on the Burning Sky Centipede's body seemed to have fused together and turned into a magnificent glazed color. Immediately after, the Burning Sky Centipede opened its mouth and spat out a bundle of intertwined flames at Lin Yuan. At that moment, someone below the arena suddenly shouted, "Fuck, it's actually 8 kinds of high-grade exceptional flames. It's actually 8 kinds of high-grade exceptional flames." Even a suzerain fae wouldn't be able to withstand the damage from 8 kinds of high-grade exceptional flames. As Zhong Zhe's opponent, Lin Yuan naturally saw what the 8 flames on the Burning Sky Centipede's back were. Facing the menacing flame attack, Lin Yuan planned to test his ethereal jellyfish's diamond ability, Spatial Shift. Lin Yuan did not summon the ethereal jellyfish. If he did, the ethereal jellyfish's chubby body would probably be roasted into jellyfish jerky by the arena's high temperature. Therefore, he relied on his body to casually execute spatial transference. However, the ethereal jellyfish was a Diamond X/Legend Fae and had yet to become a fantasy breed. In other words, the ethereal jellyfish's strength was only equivalent to a Platinum X/Fantasy I Fae. Even if the ethereal jellyfish's spatial shift had a strong protective effect against elemental damage, it could circle out the space that was purely filled with elemental energy within a certain range and transfer the space to another dimension. However, there was a limit to the elemental energy that the ethereal jellyfish's spatial shift could circle out. If there was too much elemental energy, the space would be broken. Therefore, Lin Yuan did not release the ethereal jellyfish's spatial shift once. Facing the Burning Sky Centipede's menacing attack formed by the fusion of 2 Class 8 exceptional flames, Lin Yuan waved his hand and released 30 spatial shifts. Anyway, Lin Yuan had stimulated the spirit qi imprint, and he had plenty of spiritual power in his body that could not be used up. Now, Lin Yuan perfectly interpreted what it meant to have spirit qi and be willful. Under everyone's gaze, Zhong Zhe's 2 high-grade exceptional flames attack was like a fat pig thrown into the sea in front of Lin Yuan, immediately disappearing without a trace. The second one was even worse. End of this chapter. Chapter 878. Before everyone could be surprised, the heaven-burning centipede's next attack arrived in front of Lin Yuan. When Lin Yuan had checked the heaven-burning centipede's true data, he knew that its exclusive skill, 8 Refinements of Exceptional Flame, was to use 8 different flames to combine and increase the damage 8 times. Therefore, Lin Yuan was already mentally prepared. The number of times Lin Yuan released the ethereal jellyfish's diamond spatial transfer kept multiplying. 30 times, 60 times, 120 times, 240 times, 480 times, 960 times, 1,920 times, 3,840 times. The heaven-burning centipede's 8 refinements of exceptional flames, 8 attacks were like flowers in a mirror and the moon in the water. Even Zhongzai's expression turned sluggish, and he looked at Lin Yuan with eyes full of disbelief. The younger generation of the top factions and veteran factions outside the arena could no longer hold it in and shouted Lin Yuan's name. Lin Yuan was strong, and so was Zhongzai. However, Zhongzai's strength had always been traceable, and the phase abilities could also be seen clearly. However, Lin Yuan's series of actions had broken the original understanding of the younger generation. They did not expect that a battle could be fought like this. If Lin Yuan's current strength was given by phase, the younger generation of the top factions could not help but think in their hearts. If Lin Yuan summoned these phase, how powerful would they be? After all, when a spirit chi professional used an ability without summoning phase, the ability's effect would be greatly reduced. If Lin Yuan knew what the younger generation of the veteran factions and top factions were thinking, he would probably laugh awkwardly. If he had summoned Little Black, Genius, and the ethereal jellyfish, Little Black, Genius, and the ethereal jellyfish would have been turned into ashes by Zhongzai's probing attack. The only reason he was able to persevere in the arena until now was because of the resistance provided by the Princess Robe's Law. This resistance would not be added to Lin Yuan's phase through the contract. Although Lin Yuan's method of turning the 8 refinements of exceptional flames damage into nothingness looked a little shocking, only Lin Yuan knew the pain. Even if he activated the spirit chi imprint, the nearly 7,600 spatial transfers had basically exhausted the accumulated spiritual power in the spirit chi imprint. Lin Yuan did not have any excess spiritual power to waste. After a brief daze, Zhongzai stretched out his palm and stretched forward. A scarlet color appeared on Zhongzai's palm, and Lin Yuan immediately sensed the sacred source's aura. At that moment, Zhongzai looked up and instructed the heaven-burning roar. Land of Fire Fantasy. As soon as the words Fire Fantasy Village were uttered, the sky-burning centipede let out a roar that resounded through the outer palace of the Night Palace. Balls of strange flames gushed out from the heaven-burning hose body. These strange flames turned into colorful bricks and tiles in the air. Between the bricks and tiles, it was as if the entire martial arena had been forged into a majestic city made of flames. Magnificent flame flowers swayed in the air in the city. Lin Yuan knew that each flame flower was a flame characteristic left behind after a strange flame had been absorbed. However, the Burning Sky Centipede's exclusive skill, Fire Fantasy Town, was filled with tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of fire characteristics. The characteristics of these flames intertwined together, forming the embryonic form of a world of flames. Lin Yuan, who was in the Fire Fantasy Town, still felt an indescribable heat and burning pain even after activating the Princess Dress's Cold Flame Law and the Gilded Flame Dragon Lyce's Burning Flame Law. Lin Yuan's skin ached under the roasting of the fire elements. Under the roasting of the fire element, Lin Yuan could feel his sweat exuding a strong smell of blood. At that moment, Zhongzai was like a god in the world of flames. As they watched Lin Yuan's skin continuously ooze blood, everyone felt that Lin Yuan was going to stop here. On one hand, Lin Yuan was too young, and on the other hand, his sacred source life form had been activated. However, this sacred source life form could not protect Lin Yuan as dutifully as the arms that were hugging him. At that moment, everyone saw Lin Yuan reach forward, just like Zhongzai. However, Lin Yuan did not spread his palm forward. Instead, he made a grasping motion. Everyone saw the woman's illusory figure behind Lin Yuan suddenly become solid, and the woman's closed eyes quietly opened. The moment the woman opened her eyes, the 10-meter-tall woman's phantom behind Lin Yuan disappeared. Immediately after, a slender sword appeared in Lin Yuan's hand. The sword's scabbard depicted the woman in a fluttering dress. The dress seemed to be nurturing a magical world. Looking at the long sword in Lin Yuan's hand, it wasn't just the outer palace that was stirred up. Even the outer palace was stirred up, At that moment, the calm voice was filled with interest and surprise. How exciting! This young fellow has exceeded this old man's expectations. The Moon Empress' eyes flickered, showing that her heart was not calm. As the Moon Empress sat on the throne, Cold Moon and Dark Moon behind her could not see her flickering eyes. Otherwise, they would immediately know that the Moon Empress' heart was in turmoil. Otherwise, her eyes would not have flickered at all. The experts in the inner palace who had contracted a sacred source life form could feel that Lin Yuan's sacred source aura had not changed. Even if the sacred source life form had changed, it was still a sacred source life form. However, the top factions and veteran leaders who had not contracted a sacred source life form were looking at Lin Yuan in shock. At the same time, they secretly cast glances at the Moon Empress. They did not understand how a 17-year-old youth like Lin Yuan could contract two sacred source life forms at the same time. Chef Supreme looked at the Moon Empress with surprise and said, "Moon Empress, you taught your disciple well." When the Moon Empress heard Chef Supreme's words, her expression immediately became strange. She glanced at Chef Supreme, feeling that he was targeting her. Apart from the usual question and answer session that happened once every 2 weeks, the Moon Empress could not remember what else she had taught Lin Yuan. Hence, although Chef Supreme's words were meant to be good, the Moon Empress felt that he was picking on her. Hence, although Chef Supreme's words were meant to be a compliment, the Moon Empress felt that he was picking on her. The Moon Empress looked at Lin Yuan, whose body was bleeding from the roasting, and said to Chef Supreme, "Not like you. Unlike you, all the disciples you've accepted are so worry-free." Chef Supreme's face lit up when he heard that. Chef Supreme thought back to what he had just said and did not feel that there was anything wrong with what he had said. Could it be that the Moon Empress was angry because Lin Yuan did not perform well? On the stage, Zhongzhe raised his hand high. The red color in his palm was like a burning torch in the center of a world of flames. The moment the crimson flame changed, Lin Yuan drew the sacred sword sealed in the scabbard. Third time. End of this chapter. Chapter 879. The Bamboo Monarch, who had been quietly sitting on the chair in the inner palace, looked at Lin Yuan with an expression of admiration. The Bamboo Monarch was different from Chef Supreme. Chef Supreme had only seen Lin Yuan in the Radiant Moon Palace a dozen days ago, but the Bamboo Monarch had already seen Lin Yuan half a year ago in the royal capital's outskirts. At that time, Lin Yuan had been in a sorry state, covered in blood as he stood behind the Moon Empress. He had almost been killed by Cheng Wu. He had looked so young and immature. It had only been half a year, and that immature youth had already grown to such a level? Moon Empress, your disciple's sacred source life form is quite interesting. I can sense that the sacred source life form is only a 2-star life form, but it seems to have more than one function. As one of the 3 Class 5 creation masters, the Bamboo Monarch's ability to detect sacred source life forms was far superior to Zhongzhe and Gulang. The Bamboo Monarch had immediately probed Lin Yuan's sacred source life form the moment he activated it. Like the other low-class creation masters, the Bamboo Monarch could sense that there were thousands of barriers on the surface of Lin Yuan's sacred source life form. These barriers prevented the Bamboo Monarch's spiritual energy from penetrating it. However, when the Bamboo Monarch activated his comprehended willpower, his willpower evolved into laws, and the laws evolved into a world. The Bamboo Monarch realized that willpower, laws, and worlds could penetrate the barriers on the surface of Lin Yuan's sacred source life form, so the Bamboo Monarch did the same. However, after breaking through a few hundred weak barriers, the Bamboo Monarch realized that his world power had encountered a thick layer of obstruction. This thick barrier was even more solid than the weak barriers from before. However, it was easy for the Bamboo Monarch to use the world power to break through this barrier. However, the Bamboo Monarch was not sure if his invasive probing would affect Lin Yuan. If his probing really affected Lin Yuan, the Moon Empress wouldn't let him off. Therefore, the Bamboo Monarch suppressed his curiosity and chose to ask the Moon Empress instead. The Moon Empress did not answer the Bamboo Monarch's question. Instead, she changed the topic. Chef Supreme's disciple's sacred source life form has already reached 3-star and is at the critical point of 4-star. He only needs an opportunity to break through 4-star and transform from the infant stage into the growth stage. I believe that Zhongzhe's battle with Lin Yuan is a good opportunity. The Moon Empress did not wish to discuss Lin Yuan's sacred source life form with the Bamboo Monarch. The woman that had appeared behind Lin Yuan was his sacred source life form, and the sword that the woman had turned into was also his sacred source life form. These two completely different sacred source life forms had the same sacred source aura, so they were definitely the same type of sacred source life form. This meant that Lin Yuan's sacred source life form had two forms, which the Moon Empress had never encountered before. When the Moon Empress had seen him in the Radiant Moon Palace, she had discovered that he had the ability to hide his spirit chi professional rank. Now that he thought about it, Lin Yuan's ability to hide his identity as a spirit chi professional should be the same as a sacred source life form's ability to block detection. In addition, he had displayed fire and poison elemental immunity, spiritual protection, and his current attacking stance. The Moon Empress did not know what was going on without carefully inspecting Lin Yuan's sacred source life form. However, the Moon Empress had always adhered to a principle when it came to educating Lin Yuan. It was fine as long as one knew the trump card, and there was no need to reveal it to others. This was also why the Moon Empress had never asked about Lin Yuan's strength. Just now, the Moon Empress had sensed the Bamboo Monarch probing Lin Yuan. It was fortunate that the Bamboo Monarch didn't continue probing after encountering an obstruction. Otherwise, the Moon Empress would have already made a move on the Bamboo Monarch and interrupted his probing. Chef Supreme was originally puzzled as to why the Moon Empress had suddenly rebuked him. However, when he recalled the Moon Empress' temperament, he didn't pay much attention to it. Upon hearing the Moon Empress praise, Chef Supreme Zhongzhe said with a smile, "If Zhongzhe can increase the sacred source lifeform's star rank in this battle, it will evolve from the infant stage to the adult stage and obtain new abilities. Then I really have to thank Lin Yuan for creating such a good opportunity for Zhongzhe." Lu Jie could feel the sacred source aura from Lin Yuan and Zhongzhe's bodies. He could feel the sacred source life forms in his body stirring. Based on his conversation with the sacred source life form, Lu Jie knew that Zhongzhe's sacred source life form's star was higher than Lin Yuan's. Gu Lang turned to look at Lu Jie as the sacred source life form in his body stirred restlessly. Zhongzhe's sacred source life form is very strong. It's a pure combat type sacred source life form. My sacred source life form has already reached class 4 and obtained its second ability. However, in terms of sacred source life forms, my sacred source life form is completely suppressed by Zhongzhe's sacred source life form. Senior Zhou Ming will be busy from now on. As Gu Lang spoke, Zhongzhe's voice sounded in the arena. Zhongzhe's voice was filled with solemnity and even a hint of holiness. Heaven's crimson flame heavenly country. As Zhongzhe shouted, the flames floating in the air of the fire fantasy country seemed to be on a pilgrimage. The characteristics of each flame condensed into a resplendent beam of light that shot toward the crimson flame in Zhongzhe's hand. The flames floating in the air of the fire fantasy country were the residual characteristics of an alien flame after it was absorbed. After the flames absorbed the fire characteristics of the origin, the remaining parts became vigorous fire elements that nourished the bricks and tiles of the fire fantasy country. Every brick and tile of the fire fantasy country was indeed made of alien flames. After these alien flames absorbed the fire elements left behind by the flames started to move. The fire from the bricks and tiles began to jump, and finally, the jumping fire turned into a dancing flame. The temperature of the fire fantasy country suddenly increased by more than 1-fold. Zhou Ming sensed that the temperature in the fire fantasy country had risen to Lin Yuan's limit and was about to protect him. Zhou Ming felt as though Lin Yuan had instantly turned into a towering mountain standing in the world of flames. It was as though the mountain was pure green, untainted by 10,000 fires. A majestic vitality suddenly gushed out of Lin Yuan's body and swam in it. After the rising temperature of the flames destroyed Lin Yuan's body turned pale. After the rising temperature of the flames destroyed Lin Yuan's body, the majestic vitality allowed Lin Yuan's burned body to regenerate. Lin Yuan had already activated the Jasmine Lily's exclusive skill, Life Imprint. Lin Yuan sighed in his heart. The Cold Snow Pine's Cold Flame Law is a Myth 3 law and has the characteristics of ice and fire. But the Cold Flame Law's ice element characteristic is obviously higher than the fire element's resistance. Lin Yuan felt that if the princess's skirt was engraved with a pure Myth 3 fire element law, he would not have had to activate the Jasmine Lily's exclusive skill, Life Imprint. The first was even better. End of this chapter. Chapter 880. Zhuo Ming, who had already entered the arena, retreated awkwardly when he saw Lin Yuan's skin, which had been damaged by the flames, and immediately recovered. Zhuo Ming felt that he had learned something new. This big shot's disciple really had endless trump cards. Every trump card could have a serious impact on the balance of the battle. Suddenly, Lin Yuan felt the exceptional fire in the fire fantasy country under his feet start to become violent. The crimson color in Zhong Zai's hand was like a singularity, and its gravitational force shattered half of the bricks and tiles that constructed the fire fantasy country. The shattered bricks and tiles poured into the crimson color, causing it to expand in Zhong Zai's palm and evolve into a kingdom of crisscrossing crimson flames. After this crimson kingdom was formed, Zhong Zai shook his wrist and threw it toward Lin Yuan. While Zhong Zai was condensing the crimson kingdom, Lin Yuan had used Morbius True Data to examine Zhong Zai's sacred source lifeform. Zhong Zai's sacred source lifeform was called the Heaven's Crimson Fire. Its current function was to condense the fire characteristics and fire elements in the strange flames into the fire law in an instant. Zhong Zai's red flame heavenly country contained a complete fire law formed by the characteristics of nearly 100,000 flames. Although this rule could only be condensed for a split second, it truly existed. In this age where the younger generation was still controlling fantasy breed phase, Zhong Zai's use of the law could be said to be a dimensional reduction attack. But to Lin Yuan, Princess was the true expert at playing with willpower and laws. Princess, who had always played with willpower and laws, now had a new toy at the level of the Dark Death World. After weighing the pros and cons, Lin Yuan injected the Myth 3 Nightmare Dream Law inscribed in the princess dress into the sacred sword in his hand. This was the first time Lin Yuan used the princess' sacred sword's function, the sacred sword's tip. As Lin Yuan injected the Nightmare Dream Law into the sacred sword, the ordinary sacred sword in his hand suddenly turned grayish-black, and a grayish-black mist rose from the sword tip. The mist seemed to hide a bat that was waiting for an opportunity to suck people's sweet dreams. Immediately after, he held the sword in a reverse grip and shook it. All the grayish-black swamp in the sword in his hand gathered at the tip of the sword. If the scarlet light in Zhong Zai's palm was the core of the fire illusion country, then the sacred source lifeform's Heaven's Crimson Fire Kingdom transcended the fire illusion country. In that case, the grayish-black color entangled on the tip of Lin Yuan's sword could already compete with the red flame heaven formed by the Heaven's Crimson Fire in Zhong Zai's palm. In the fog, a faintly discernible dark bat was howling at the entire world of flames. Then, he swung his sword and struck out the Myth 3 Nightmare Law condensed at the tip of the sword. The grayish-black mist collided with the kingdom of fire that Zhong Zai had thrown over. The grayish-black mist and the crimson mist alternated, making it impossible for the younger generation of Yiyang Palace, including Gu Lang, to see the situation on the stage. After a long time, the grayish-black and scarlet colors canceled each other out. Lin Yuan and Zhong Zai stood there, panting heavily. It was obvious that they had suffered quite a bit from the battle just now. The veteran faction prodigies and top faction prodigies who were spectating all had their mouths wide open. They stared in disbelief at the two people standing on the stage. An elegant-looking girl standing beside Xing Yin could not help but curse at this moment. Fuck. Is this the damage that a fucking youngster can do? Are these two monsters? The fight between Lin Yuan and Zhong Zai had been too impactful, causing the outer palace to be in a dead silence. This made the girl's ridicule even more obvious. The elegant girl next to Xing Yin also reacted at that moment. She was so embarrassed that she wanted to dig a hole in the ground. It was fine if the girls complained about it in private, but it was a different story if they said it in public. It could be said that although her exclamation just now was not malicious, it was already equivalent to disrespecting Zhongzhe and Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan was fine, but Zhongzhe was Chef Supreme's disciple. She had said that Zhongzhe was not a human and that Zhongzhe was a monster. If someone with ulterior motives were to make a fuss about it, he would be in for a hard time. The elegant girl next to Xing Yin secretly glanced around and realized that no one was looking at her. Only then did they heave a sigh of relief. Their gazes were fixed on the two shining men on the stage. She saw a few top faction young masters, who she had always thought were very handsome, gaping at the two people on the stage. The girl suddenly felt that there was nothing to be fascinated about with these top faction young masters. The girl continued to look at Lin Yuan and Zhongzhe, who were in the combat arena. This glance made the girl feel conflicted. Both of them were so outstanding, and she did not know who to like. But if these two people could be together, it seemed like, just as a mysterious smile appeared on the girl's face, she heard a coquettish voice beside her ear. "Qianhui, are you hungry? Wipe your saliva." Zhuang Qianhui hurriedly closed her mouth and subconsciously sucked, but she did not expect to let out a slurping sound. At that moment, the majestic vitality in Lin Yuan's body was flowing rapidly, helping Lin Yuan repair his damaged body. The aftermath of the grayish-black and crimson collision had dissipated, and he looked evenly matched with Zhongzhe. However, Lin Yuan knew that he was the one at a disadvantage in the collision. During the collision, his body was constantly being eroded by the fire law's power. Thanks to the Princess Robe's fire resistance and the massive vitality, he had survived. Logically speaking, Zhongzhe's sacred source life form, the Heaven's Crimson Fire, relied on nearly 100,000 fire characteristics and fire elemental energy to form the fire law. It was at most at Myth I. Even with the Burning Sky Ho's exclusive skill, Fire Fantasy Town, which doubled its power, it would not reach Myth II. On the other hand, the Nightmare Dream Law that Lin Yuan used was a Myth III existence. Logically speaking, the grayish-black color should crush the scarlet color. However, the Princess Robe's law was very different from the Heaven's Crimson Fire's law. What Lin Yuan had just unleashed was not the complete Nightmare Law but the Myth III Nightmare Law's energy. After a period of charging, Lin Yuan could use the Myth III Nightmare Law to unleash such an energy attack again. Zhongzhe's sacred source life form, the Heaven's Crimson Fire, had condensed a complete law, but Zhongzhe had sacrificed it. The explosive power produced by sacrificing the law was not on the same level as simply using the law's energy. The second was even worse. End of this chapter. Chapter 881. He finally knew the damage he could cause when he used the Myth III law engraved in the Princess Robe to launch a blow. Each attack could reach the level of a suzerain/Myth I phase all-out attack. Although the power was slightly weaker than Lin Yuan had expected, Lin Yuan was still very satisfied. After all, this attack could be used repeatedly after the cooldown. Lin Yuan had considered it before deciding to use the Nightmare Law. The Myth III laws engraved in the princess dress were the Vicious Poison Law, the Cold Flame Law, and the Nightmare Law. Lin Yuan could use these three laws to cause damage to Zhongzhe. However, after using the energy within the laws, Lin Yuan would not be able to enjoy the resistance of the laws. If the Cold Flame Law were to be unleashed, Lin Yuan would probably be roasted into pieces the moment he unleashed this attack. Lin Yuan was also worried about using the Vicious Poison Law because the blue venom flame puppet that Zhongzhe had just summoned had the ability to use fire poison. Although the blue venom flame puppet had entered a near-death state and been put away by Zhongzhe, Lin Yuan did not dare to guarantee that Zhongzhe would not have other ways to heal the blue venom flame puppet and let it continue fighting. Or perhaps Zhongzhe had other fays that could use poison that he had not summoned. Therefore, after some consideration, using the Nightmare Law was Lin Yuan's best choice. At this moment, Zhongzhe, who was on the stage, suddenly entered a strange state. He closed his eyes tightly. After Zhongzhe entered this state, the Saint Genesis aura on his body abruptly changed, becoming even denser than before. However, the process of this sacred source aura change was like a blooming flower bud. It still needed some time for it to fully bloom. Upon seeing this, Zhuo Ming's expression tensed up. Ming could sense that Zhongzhe's sacred source life form had entered a state of metamorphosis and growth. For a sacred source life form to increase its star grade at each growth stage, it only needed to accumulate the required resources according to the sacred source life form's characteristics. However, for a sacred source life form to metamorphose and grow, it was no longer a problem that could be solved by simply accumulating resources. It also needed an opportunity. This opportunity was very rare, just like how spirit chi professionals needed fate to comprehend a willpower rune. Once the opportunity to descend was missed due to some reason, who knew how long it would take for the opportunity to descend again? And Zhongzhe was currently in this opportunity. If Lin Yuan attacked Zhongzhe now, Zhongzhe, who was in a state of epiphany, would not be able to fight back. Lin Yuan could easily become the champion of the civil and martial arena, but at the same time, Zhongzhe would lose this rare opportunity. The rules of the martial arena were decided by the 13 Majesties. A competition was a competition, and it emphasized absolute fairness. It was impossible for them to stop midway because of what had happened to Zhongzhe. Thus, the current situation puts Ming in a difficult position. The supreme chef of the inner palace of Yeong Palace also stood up from his chair. Zhongzhe's sacred source life form, the Heaven's Scarlet Fire, had already reached 3 stars a long time ago and was in the process of evolving from its infancy stage to its growth stage. However, he had not found a suitable opportunity and had been stuck for more than a year. For a supreme genius like Zhongzhe, who had always been on the road to becoming stronger, a year's time was simply not something he could afford to waste. Supreme Chef was ready to stop the competition on behalf of Zhongzhe. In Supreme Chef's opinion, compared to an uncontracted sacred source life form and a radiant light metal, Zhongzhe's crimson heaven flame was more important. At that moment, Supreme Chef saw Lin Yuan, who had been opposing Zhongzhe, take a few steps back and walk to the edge of the arena. Although he did not say it clearly, Lin Yuan's actions immediately made everyone understand his intentions. Lin Yuan was prepared to wait for Zhongzhe's heavenly scarlet fire to evolve before continuing the unfinished battle with Zhongzhe. Lin Yuan's actions not only made the younger generation of Yeong Palace look at him in a different light, but even the majesties of Yeong Palace looked at Lin Yuan differently. The fire in the fire fantasy country was still burning. At that moment, Lin Yuan, who had retreated to the edge of the arena with the sacred sword in hand, seemed to emit a beam of light that was brighter than the fire in the fire fantasy country. A dazzling beam of light. Standing at the edge of the arena, Lin Yuan swung the sacred sword in his hand twice, carving out 2 sword flowers. Zhongzhe's sacred source life form, the Heaven's Scarlet Fire, would have a second ability when it evolved from its infancy stage to its growth stage. At that time, Zhongzhe's strength would definitely increase. If it was purely for the reward, Lin Yuan would have rushed forward at this time. If Zhongzhe was an enemy, Lin Yuan would not have hesitated to rush forward and use his fiercest moves. However, Zhongzhe, who was standing on the martial arena, was not an enemy, but an opponent. Even if they did not have a personal relationship as Uncle Li and Auntie Zhang's junior brother, Zhongzhe was considered one of Lin Yuan's people. After a full 15 minutes, Zhongzhe's tightly shut eyes opened completely. When Zhongzhe opened his eyes, they had become the same red color as his palm. This red color was neither bloody nor evil. It had an incomparable dignity and majesty. However, Zhongzhe looked at Lin Yuan with a dignified gaze that was filled with gratitude. Just as Zhongzhe was about to raise his hand to signal Ming to admit defeat, he saw Lin Yuan stride forward and stand opposite him. At the same time, Lin Yuan's clear voice sounded in Zhongzhe's ears. Zhongzhe, let's continue with the previous battle. I believe that if I had entered a state of epiphany, you would not have attacked me. When Zhongzhe heard that, he subconsciously thought that if Lin Yuan had entered a state of epiphany, he would not have attacked Lin Yuan. But even though he said that, that was not the case. However, Zhongzhe was not a bashful person. It was enough to keep some gratitude and favors in his heart. When something really happened, he would return the favor. That was what a man should do. Zhongzhe looked at Lin Yuan and said, "Yes. In that case, I'll unleash the strongest attack after the Crimson Heaven Flames transformation." With that, The scarlet color in Zhongzai's palm completely covered the sky above the combat ring. The sky above the martial arena lit up with mysterious flame runes. These flame runes finally converged into a portal. At this moment, the crimson gate formed by the flame runes was slowly opening. While Zhongzai was channeling the heaven's scarlet fire with all his might, Lin Yuan was not idle. With a flick of his hand, a red energy element shot at the heaven-burning roar. This caused the burning sky centipede, who was fully activating the exclusive skill fiery fantasy town, to enter a blissful and sluggish state. Immediately after, the red light pillar began to frantically extract the vitality from the burning sky centipede's body and pour it into Lin Yuan's vitality imprint. Chapter 882. In the face of the Diamond X/Fantasy V burning sky centipede, the Jasmine Lily's life force extraction could not cause serious damage in a short time. Lin Yuan did not want the Jasmine Lily to cause much damage to the burning sky centipede. Instead, he wanted the Jasmine Lily's reverse healing to control the burning sky centipede. The Jasmine Lily's reverse healing control effect was not a negative state. Instead, it put the body and mind in an extremely comfortable state. It was equivalent to a buff that eliminated fatigue. Therefore, phase would not have any resistance to it. After the red light landed on the burning sky centipede, the fire fantasy country that the burning sky centipede had been working hard to maintain immediately collapsed. Upon seeing the red light beam, everyone's memories seemed to be pulled back to the strange battle at the All-Star Mash. Even though the fire fantasy country had dissipated under the Jasmine Lily's control, the temperature on the arena did not decrease. Instead, it rapidly increased. This temperature came from Zhongzai's sacred source life form, the heaven's scarlet fire, which had just entered the growth stage. Even so, Lin Yuan had achieved his goal. He wanted to destroy the fire fantasy country so that it could not enhance Zhongzai's sacred source life form, the heaven's scarlet fire. Lin Yuan gripped the sacred sword in his hand tightly and activated his strongest trump card. It was the Dark Death World's sacred sword mode sword skill, Dark Crow Withering Strike. At that moment, red armored angels with a pair of flaming wings on their backs descended from the red portal formed by flame runes in the sky above Zhongzai. According to Lin Yuan's senses, these flaming angels were all products of the fire element and were not real life forms. However, the gathering of the extremely dense fire element caused these angels to be filled with intelligence. After Zhongzai sent the 21st flaming angel down from the red portal, his body immediately trembled. Zhongzai had exhausted all the spiritual power in his body. Under Zhongzai's command, the 21 flaming angels summoned from the red portal wielded a flaming battle blade and shield and flapped their wings as they charged toward Lin Yuan. While Zhongzai was summoning the angels through the red portal, the half of the arena that Lin Yuan was at had been coated with a layer of darkness. Not only was this layer of darkness not dispelled by the raging crimson flames, but it was also continuously invading the area occupied by the crimson flames. At this time, Night Leaning Moon, who was sitting on the 13th chair in the inner palace of Yiyang Palace, let out a soft cry of surprise. It's actually darkness-type power of darkness. As Night Leaning Moon spoke, the expressions of the other majesties had already changed. It was obvious that they had already sensed the power that the youth had displayed in the arena. However, the top and veteran factions leaders, including Elder Long Tu and elderly Yun Yaoken, looked at Lin Yuan in disbelief. Even if a 17 or 18-year-old youth was the Moon Empress disciple, he shouldn't be able to control power above the laws, right? Night Leaning Moon spoke again while the leaders of the veteran and peak forces were indescribably shocked. Although it's the Dark Attribute World's power, this power is only maintained at a certain level. In terms of power, it's only the power of a suzerain/myth 3-phase all-out attack. Looks like the outcome of the civil and martial duels is already clear. Night Leaning Moon's words caused the leaders of the veteran and peak powers to break out in a waterfall of sweat. The leaders of the veteran and peak factions could not help but shout in their hearts. Chief Guard, world power is already very impressive, right? It had to be known that a large portion of the leaders of the veteran and peak factions present had not reached the world level in terms of power. At that moment, Lin Yuan was like the ruler of the darkness in the arena, holding his sword elegantly in the darkness. Dark crows kept flying out from the tip of the sword. There were a total of 28 dark crows. These 28 dark crows circled and danced with Lin Yuan as the center. Every time the dark crows circled, their feet would land on the tip of the sacred sword in Lin Yuan's hand, seemingly waiting for him, the ruler of darkness, to give an order. Among the combat skills and movement techniques he had learned from the body-transcending memory grass, there were quite a number of sword skills. Lin Yuan swung his sword without any moves or tests, but he integrated the strengths of hundreds of schools of thought. When he swung his sword, a dark crow hit the flaming angel's body, forming a black withering mark. The 21 flaming angels were quite brave in battle, but Lin Yuan was not at a disadvantage when colliding with them with just one sword. Lin Yuan held the sacred sword and chanted softly. Sword skill, Dark Crow Withering Strike. As Lin Yuan chanted softly, the 28 dark crows returned to the tip of the sword and bloomed on it like a blooming flower. The 28 dark crows were like butterflies flying through flowers as they shuttled back and forth and collided with the 21 flaming angels. After 14 withering marks appeared on each flaming angel's body, it began to decay. The flaming angel's body, which was formed by flames, was like a withering flower of fire. As the dark crows shuttled back and forth, 56 withering marks appeared on one of the flaming angels. This flaming angel had entered a true withering state and fell from the sky onto the dark crystal ground. There was not a trace of the afterglow of flames in the withering and decaying body. As the first flaming angel fell to the ground, each of the 21 flaming angels entered a true withering state under the dark crow's attacks. Lin Yuan held the sacred sword and panted lightly. It could be said that in this battle with Zhong Zhe, apart from the 2 myth 3 laws engraved on the Princess Luo Pao, Lin Yuan had already emptied himself. During the previous battle, the 28 dark crows that were hit by the dark crow withering strike would become more illusory with each collision. After defeating the 21 flaming angels, the 28 dark crows entered a translucent state. At this moment, the 28 illusory dark crows were flying around Zhong Zhe, who had lost all of his spiritual power, flaunting Lin Yuan's victory. Just as Lin Yuan was about to signal the left palm minister, Zhuo Ming, he suddenly heard a deafening shout. It was unknown who was the first to shout, Lin Yuan. Then, his name resounded in the outer palace of Night Glory Palace. When he heard hundreds of voices shouting his name at the same time, Lin Yuan was slightly startled. When he turned around, he saw the sincere congratulations and astonishment in the eyes of these prodigies. When he saw these gazes, Lin Yuan knew that he had used his strength to conquer these proud and arrogant prodigies. He had used his strength to gain recognition and respect. However, Lin Yuan was not immersed in the cheers. Instead, he turned around and looked at the black crystal wall that was only one wall away from the inner palace of Yeong Palace. A bright smile appeared on his face. Although Lin Yuan could not see the Moon Empress, his smile was for her. The previous 100 flower brocade pearls were his answer to the Moon Empress regarding their growth. He had also unleashed his combat ability to the extreme in today's civil and martial duels. It could be considered as giving the Moon Empress an answer sheet of his combat ability. Lin Yuan's lips parted slightly as he faced the pitch-black crystal wall and spoke silently. Master, I won. Lin Yuan knew that his current actions were seen by the other majesties and might be interpreted as youthful insolence. However, he only wanted to convey the most direct joy in his heart to his master, the Moon Empress, who had always been watching over him. Immediately after, he lowered his head to look at the sacred sword in his hand and said softly to himself, "It's time for you to use it. Lin Yuan, you win." Chapter 883. When he said to himself, Lin Yuan, you win, Lin Yuan revealed a nostalgic expression. Back then, when he had just supported the Fei store in the Xia region, it had been difficult for him to move a pot of usnia. It could be said that every time he buried energy ores in the usnia pot, Lin Yuan had gritted his teeth and persevered. The usnia that was not even a normal Fei was not very heavy, but its root system was very developed. In order for it to grow well, it needed a very large pot to be planted. A usnea pot with soil would weigh about 25 caddies. It was a huge burden for Lin Yuan, who could not even sense spirit qi at that time. Every time Lin Yuan carried a pot of usnea and placed it on the shelf, he would have to sit down and rest for a while. His days passed just like that. At that time, Lin Yuan's dream and longing was to maintain the small store and earn enough Federation dollars to help Chu Xi complete her studies. Lin Yuan did not intend to spend all the difficulties on Chu Xi's education for his younger sister, who came from the same mother. Even if Lin Yuan did not have the ability to obtain powerful Feis for Chu Xi by relying on a small Fei store, it was still possible to save some money and obtain a defense-type Fei suitable for team combat for Chu Xi. Who would have thought that the mediocre Lin Yuan would actually stand on the Nix Assembly's civil and martial ring 8 months later and win the championship, receiving cheers and applause? Lin Yuan felt that his journey was like a miracle. Even though there had been no lack of opportunities, Lin Yuan still had to thank his past self for his hard work. During these 8 months, Lin Yuan had almost never stopped to enjoy himself. As long as he was free, he would enhance Feis in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. Mediocrity was not just mediocrity, but the pinnacle was not willing to be at the pinnacle. Lin Yuan was not a conceited person, but he still felt that he could no longer be described as mediocre. In short, no matter what, his original intention was still the same. 8 months was just the beginning, and it was just to give him more confidence to see this vast world. Just as Lin Yuan was reminiscing, he suddenly felt someone holding his arms and legs and lifting him up. Lin Yuan came back to his senses and looked down. He found that Lu Jie, Gao Feng, Long Tao, and Li Xian had already rushed to the arena. Before Lin Yuan could speak, he was thrown up by Lu Jie, Gao Feng, Long Tao, and Li Xian. Lin Yuan, who had mastered almost all the combat skills and martial arts moves in the world through the body-transcending memory grass, only needed to flip over to land firmly on the ground. However, Lin Yuan did not do so. Instead, he smiled and enjoyed his friend's celebration. He felt his nerves, which had been taut from the battle, relax. Gu Lang saw Lu Jie, Gao Feng, Long Tao, and Li Xian running toward the arena, but he didn't follow them immediately. However, at this moment, Gu Lang still walked onto the stage. Gu Lang walked to Zhong Zhe's side and looked at the calm Zhong Zhe. You didn't lose unjustly. Even if you used the sacred source life form Heaven's Scarlet Fire to unleash your ultimate move, you still wouldn't have a chance of winning. However, if Lin Yuan uses the last move he just used, you won't have any room to resist. Seniors Wu Ming will immediately protect you and announce that you have lost the match. Since the start of the fight, Zhong Zhe's eyes had been on Lin Yuan and had never left him. Hearing Gu Lang's words, Zhong Zhe immediately said, "I'm no match for him. I'm also very grateful to him. If it wasn't for him, my Heaven's Crimson Flame wouldn't have reached its growth stage. If I miss this opportunity, I wonder how long it will take for the Heaven Crimson Flame to evolve." Gu Lang was startled when he heard Zhong Zhe's words. Having known Zhong Zhe for more than a decade, Gu Lang knew how proud Zhong Zhe was. Gu Lang didn't think that such a proud person like Zhong Zhe would actually admit that he was inferior to someone of the same generation. Because of this battle, Zhong Zhe's sacred source life form, the Heaven Scarlet Fire, evolved to the 4-star stage, and Zhong Zhe's strength would increase the fastest. He could use resources to raise the Heaven Scarlet Fire's star level. During the battle just now, Gu Lang had keenly noticed that after Zhong Zhe had summoned the sacred source life form, even if Lin Yuan had strong fire elemental resistance, he was still affected by the fire elemental energy. Lin Yuan had been relying on a large amount of vitality that came from an unknown source to hold on. This allowed him to maintain a delicate balance between the speed of his injuries and the speed of his recovery. If Zhong Zhe's Heaven Scarlet Fire's star level was a little higher, Lin Yuan's fire elemental resistance and vitality would not be useful. Just as Gu Lang was about to comfort Zhong Zhe, he realized that Zhong Zhe had already run forward toward Lin Yuan. Gu Lang couldn't help but feel puzzled when he saw Zhong Zhe join Lu Jie, Gao Feng, Long Tao, and Li Xian. Previously, Zhong Zhe had taken the initiative to introduce him to Lin Yuan, which was already not in line with Zhong Zhe's style of doing things. Now, after this battle, How did Zhongzhe and Lin Yuan's relationship become so good? At that moment, Xing Yin looked at Lin Yuan, who had been thrown high in the arena, and sighed with a complicated expression. No matter what Lin Yuan's identity was, he now had a Radiance medal and was qualified to compete for a Radiance Envoy and the Radiance Light Knights. All these years, Xing Yin had been working hard to become a member of the Radiance Light Knights. Xing Yin understood that it was unrealistic for her to compete for a Radiance Envoy's position with pure healing abilities. However, now that Lin Yuan had obtained the Radiant Light Medal, it was tantamount to having one more powerful competitor. If Lin Yuan were to fight for the Radiance Envoy's position, one person would be squeezed out, thus increasing the pressure of the Radiance Light Knight Legion selection. If Lin Yuan could not become a Radiance Envoy, he would occupy another spot in the Radiance Light Knight Legion. There were still more than 2 years before the selection of the Radiance Envoys and Radiance Knights. However, based on the strength that Lin Yuan had just displayed, even if he remained stagnant in these 2 years, there was still no suspense for him to occupy a place in the Radiance Knights. Just when Xing Yin was feeling pressured, Zhuang Qianhui, who was standing beside her, spoke. "Sister Xing Yin, I've decided. Lin Yuan is my man from now on. When I get home, I'll ask my old man to propose marriage." Xing Yin stared at Zhuang Qianhui with her mouth agape. She then said in a serious tone, "Qianhui, some marriages aren't that easy to propose. Besides, where do you want your old man to go to propose to Lin Yuan?" Xing Yin had always known that Zhuang Qianhui had been spoiled rotten by her family since she was young. Not only did she have a little princess syndrome, but she was also a little infatuated. However, Zhuang Qianhui wouldn't be so careless, right? Therefore, Xing Yin planned to see if Zhuang Qianhui had guessed Lin Yuan's identity. Chapter 884. When Zhuang Qianhui heard Xing Yin's words, the way she looked at Xing Yin immediately became vigilant. "Sister Xing Yin, I remember that you like Lord Zhongzhe. You can't fall in love with someone else so quickly. Lin Yuan is mine. It doesn't matter if I don't know where to ask my old man to propose. Big brother Li Xian seems to be on such good terms with Lin Yuan. You should know where Lin Yuan is staying, right? I'll just ask brother Li Xian when the time comes." Upon hearing Zhuang Qianhui's words, Xing Yin sighed softly. Zhuang Qianhui was a direct descendant of a top-notch faction, and it was impossible for him not to have heard of the Moon Empress disciple participating in the Nix assembly. It seemed like Zhuang Qianhui was really infatuated with Lin Yuan. The Nix assembly's official meeting was about to begin, and if Lin Yuan was really the Moon Empress disciple, he would definitely reveal his identity. Once Lin Yuan's identity was revealed, no matter how much Zhuang Qianhui was favored in the family, she wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Old Master Zhuang did not dare to ascend the Leaning Moon Mountain to be a matchmaker for Lin Yuan and Zhuang Qianhui. It seemed like Zhuang Qianhui was destined to have a one-sided love. The Moon Empress, who was sitting on the throne 13, saw Lin Yuan smile through the black crystal wall and the silent words, "Master, I won." She suddenly felt a surge of warmth in her heart. This warm current flowed from her heart to her eyes, causing them to moisten. The Moon Empress hurriedly closed her eyes and took a full minute to suppress her emotions. This scene was naturally seen by the other 11 majesties who were preparing to congratulate the Moon Empress. The 11 High Lords were stunned. Apart from the incident 10 years ago, they had never seen the Moon Empress so emotional. The Moon Empress had always been a cold person, and it seemed like Lin Yuan's weight in her heart was truly immeasurable. However, His Majesty, who had also accepted a disciple, felt that the Moon Empress' reaction was very normal. Even if his disciple won the championship of the civil and martial arena, he would also feel honored. A minute later, the Moon Empress opened her eyes. She remembered that the first time her eyes had turned red was when the old man had died. At that time, the Moon Empress felt that she wouldn't have a second chance in her life to cry, but she didn't expect that she would inadvertently break her vow. When the Moon Empress saw Lin Yuan being tossed on the stage, she couldn't hold back her smile. The Moon Empress said to Mystic Moon, who was standing behind her, "Mystic Moon, Lin Yuan's clothes aren't easy to wear. Go and help him." Then, send this thing to Lin Yuan and let him eat it to recover from his injuries in battle. After speaking, the Moon Empress handed a brocade box to Mystic Moon. Xian Yu took the brocade box, nodded and left the inner palace. Mystic Moon also felt that she should go and take a look at Lin Yuan. Otherwise, after the Moon Empress removed the crown pattern, it would be hard for Lin Yuan to wear the Moonlight Crown robe. After all, there were more than 300 accessories in the Moonlight Royal robe. If Lin Yuan were to figure out where to put these accessories, he would not be able to finish wearing the Moonlight regalia by the next morning. At first, when Lu Jie, Gao Feng, Long Tao, and Li Xian threw him into the sky, he felt fine. However, Gao Feng's hands were really strong. If he hadn't used his body technique to adjust his balance, he would have been flipped over in 2 moves. Now that Zhong Zhe had joined the quartet, Lin Yuan was surprised to find that Zhong Zhe's hands were even stronger than Gao Feng's. Lin Yuan looked at Zhong Zhe suspiciously. Zhong Zhe couldn't be looking for revenge after losing to me in the arena, right? Lin Yuan felt that he was like a cake that was being hammered by Gao Feng and Zhong Zhe, who were constantly moving up and down in the air. When Lin Yuan realized that his butt was being hammered, he couldn't hold it in anymore. He quickly exerted force in midair and landed gracefully on the ground. After standing on the ground and chatting with everyone, Lin Yuan took out his cell phone from the Diamond Fei storage box. At that moment, Lin Yuan realized that there were 2 missed calls on his cell phone, and they were both from Mystic Moon. Lin Yuan quickly called Mystic Moon. Lin Yuan immediately knew why Mystic Moon was looking for him, so he turned to Lu Jie and said, "All right." He turned to Lu Jie and said, "We should go to the Night Language Pavilion to change." Mystic Moon had said that she would wait for him at the Night Language Pavilion. This was Lin Yuan's first time at the Night Language Pavilion, so he naturally didn't know where it was. However, as the young palatial lord of the Night Language Pavilion, Lu Jie should know where it was. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Lu Jie nodded. "Let Uncle Wright take us there in a while." Lin Yuan chatted with everyone for a while and arranged to meet again at the Nix Assembly's main meeting. Then he and Lu Jie went to the right palm official. Everyone in this small group knew Lin Yuan's and Lu Jie's identities, although they did not know what Lin Yuan meant when he said to change clothes. Although they didn't know what Lin Yuan meant by changing clothes, it should be related to the Nix Assembly's main meeting that was about to begin. When Yuja saw Lin Yuan and Lu Jie walking in front of him, he said before Lin Yuan and Lu Jie could speak, "Mystic Moon called me just now." "Xian Yu just called me. Let's go to the Night Pavilion together." After speaking to Lin Yuan, Yuja turned to Lu Jie and said, "Young palatial lord, there is still an hour left before the main meeting begins. Let me help you put on Yi Che's regal robe later." Young palatial lord, there is still an hour left before the main meeting begins. Lu Jie was about to refuse when he recalled the accessories he saw when he opened the brocade box in the Return from Faraway Manor. Lu Jie hurriedly gave up on the idea of wearing Yi Che's imperial robes. "Uncle Yu, I'll have to trouble you later." He followed Yuja all the way to the Night Language Pavilion and saw Mystic Moon standing at the entrance of the Night Language Pavilion from afar. When Mystic Moon saw Lin Yuan, she quickly walked over and greeted him. "Young lord, the Moon Empress asked me to give this to you. She said that it will allow you to recover from the injuries you suffered in the previous battle." As one of the Moon Empress' 2 moon envoys, Mystic Moon also felt honored that Lin Yuan was the champion of both the civil and martial arena. When Mystic Moon handed the brocade box to Lin Yuan, she congratulated him. "Your Highness, congratulations on becoming the champion of both the civil and martial arena." When the Moon Empress was having a question and answer session with Lin Yuan, Mystic Moon was not by her side, so he was not sure to what extent the Moon Empress had taught Lin Yuan. However, in Mystic Moon's opinion, it was normal for Lin Yuan, the Radiant Moon Palace's young lord, to be strong. However, Mystic Moon still marveled at Lin Yuan's growth speed more than once. Lin Yuan received the brocade box from Mystic Moon and smiled. "Thank you, Uncle Mystic." After speaking, he opened the brocade box that the Moon Empress had asked Mystic Moon to hand to him. There was a brownish-black pill in the brocade box. When Lin Yuan opened the brocade box, he smelled an extremely rich medicinal fragrance. When Lin Yuan inhaled the medicinal fragrance, he immediately felt that his entire body, including his soul, was receiving comprehensive care. Chapter 885. As Mystic Moon did not check the contents of the brocade box, he did not know what the Moon Empress wanted him to hand over to Lin Yuan. Xian Yu couldn't help but start coughing. The Moon Empress really doted on the young lord as usual. His Highness had indeed lost a lot of vitality in the civil and martial arena, but that boundless vitality was obviously one of his trump cards. Even though he was hungry after using it, His Highness did not seem to be affected by it. However, the Moon Empress had actually taken out a Moon Dew rejuvenation elixir that could immediately revive a person as long as they were still breathing. It didn't matter if one's vitality was exhausted or if one's soul was shattered. It was just so that the young lord could recover from the injuries he had suffered in the previous battle. This was simply too exaggerated. However, such exaggerated doting had always been the Moon Empress style toward the young highness. The right paragon, Ish, looked at the Moon Dew rejuvenation pill in Lin Yuan's hand and swallowed his saliva. The Moon Dew recovery pill was one of the Moon Empress signature products, and only the Moon Empress had it in the entire world. It was rumored that the Moon Dew Life Recovery Elixir was made with a large number of creation species plant-type phase spiritual ingredients, and the Moon Empress contracted holy weeping moon beast tears. Even if Chef Supreme and Bamboo Monarch were Class 5 creation masters, without the Moon Dew Revival Elixir's formula and the holy weeping moon beast tears, they would not be able to create the Moon Dew Revival Elixir. Now, even the chief guard had to personally go to the Radiant Moon Palace to obtain the Moon Dew rejuvenation pill, but the Moon Empress had casually given it to Lin Yuan to recover from his injuries. This was too extravagant. Yuzha had already checked on Lin Yuan's injuries when leading the way just now. Yuzha was also afraid that Lin Yuan had suffered some internal injuries in the combat arena. However, after some investigation, Yuzha found that Lin Yuan's body was simply stronger than an ox. There wasn't even a trace of impurity in his body. With one look, one could tell that he was a man who had been soaking in a jar of silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar. Although he did not know what the pill in the brocade box was, True Data had already probed its effects. Lin Yuan didn't want to waste such a precious elixir. Moreover, there were no injuries on his body that required such an effective elixir to recover. Lin Yuan quickly said to Mystic Moon, "Uncle Xian, I'll keep this pill first. I still haven't finished the jujube powder that Master ground for me with the smooth crystal silk jujube." Upon hearing that, Mystic Moon nodded and did not insist on Lin Yuan eating the Moon Dew rejuvenation pill now. In Mystic Moon's opinion, it would not be too late for Lin Yuan to eat the Lunar Dew Life recovery pill when he really needed it in the future. After putting away the brocade box containing the Lunar Dew revival pills, he took out the box containing the lunar regalia. When he opened the box again and saw the Moonlight Royal Robe, he couldn't help but sigh at its beauty. Mystic Moon hurriedly took the box that contained the Moonlight Royal Robe and said, "All right. Your Highness, take off your spirit chi clothes first. You only have an hour to wear the Moonlight Royal Robe, so you don't have much time." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan quickly took off his spirit chi clothes. Anyway, everyone here was a man, and there was nothing to be shy about. Mystic Moon immediately helped Lin Yuan put on the Moonlight Crown Robe. Just like Mystic Moon and Lin Yuan, Yuzha also helped Lu Jia put on Yi Chei's Royal Robe. Compared to the Moonlight Imperial Robe, Yi Chei's Imperial Robe wasn't any less complicated, and it was just as difficult to wear. However, Mystic Moon and Yuzha were very familiar with it. When Mystic Moon helped him put on the Moonlight Royal Robe, Lin Yuan used his hand to gently touch the layer of apricot flower patterns on the collar. After touching it, Lin Yuan found that this layer of apricot flower patterns was not embroidered. It was like petals of apricot flowers growing on the Moonlight Royal Robe. When he touched it, the layer of apricot flower petals still had the toughness of fresh plant petals, which made Lin Yuan rather curious. Mystic Moon watched Lin Yuan use his hand to touch the layers of apricot flower patterns on the Moonlight Royal Robe's collar and said with a smile, "Your Highness, these petals you touched came from a creation seed apricot fay." "Your Highness, the petals you touched came from a creation seed apricot fay." However, when other accessories are worn later, this layer of apricot flower petals will not be obvious. The radiant pearl collar will cover this layer of apricot flower patterns. The petals on this creation seed apricot fay are only subclass spiritual materials for the base of the moonlight royal robe. It is to use the beauty of the apricot flower's heavenly shadow to set off the radiant pearl's brilliance. Otherwise, these apricot flower petals are not qualified to appear on the moonlight royal robe. Upon hearing Mystic Moon's words, Lin Yuan secretly clicked his tongue and felt that the moonlight royal robe had suddenly become heavy. Lin Yuan did not dare to imagine how much radiance dollars he was wearing it. Among flower species fays, the flowers could be said to be the most precious part of them. It was only a matter of whether or not the creation seed's petals were used as materials to decorate the moonlight royal robe. This extravagance was truly unimaginable. Lin Yuan finally understood why he could not find any clues when using Morbius True Data to check this moonlight royal robe. Morbius had not become a fantasy breed and was still unable to examine things at the creation seed level. It was just like how Lin Yuan could only detect the effects of the lunar dew rejuvenation pill and not what spiritual ingredients had been used. As for what the radiant pearl that Mystic Moon was talking about, Lin Yuan did not know. It seemed that the radiant pearl was not something that he could come into contact with at his current level. At that moment, the veteran factions and the top factions management generation in the Night Peak Palace were eagerly waiting for the Nyx assembly to begin. At the same time, they were also listening intently to the conversation between the 13 High Lords, not daring to make the slightest sound. Elder Time, who had not said a word since the beginning, suddenly spoke to the other 12 High Lords. Have you heard that the Azure Federation has confirmed the news of the 4th Azure Envoy among the 5 Azure Envoys? Upon hearing Elder Time's words, the Moon Empress, Night-Leaning Moon, Bamboo Monarch, Chef Supreme, and the others frowned slightly. Obviously, they had not heard the news of the Azure Federation confirming the 4th Azure Envoy. However, since Old Man Time had spoken, his words had to be absolutely true, so there was no way he would lie. The Azure Federation and the Radiance Federation were both one of the 3 major federations, and there was a Radiance Blue route between them. There was a lot of material exchange between the 2 federations. Therefore, the news about the 4th Azure Envoy could really be considered big news. The neutral and calm voice on the phone sounded again. Elder Time, don't keep us in suspense. You just went to the Azure Federation not long ago, so you naturally know more about it than we do. Upon hearing that, Elder Time hurriedly said, clearly very respectful to that neutral and calm voice. 10 days ago, one of the 12 5-star Azure families of the Azure Federation awakened 2 beast tattoos at the same time in the younger generation. One of the beast tattoos was from the 5-star Azure family, and the other came from a 4-star family. It is said that the 4th Azure Envoy was previously a woman who was ill. After listening to Elder Time, the neutral and calm voice said, 2 beast patterns perfectly expressed in a person's body without conflict. It's really strange that 2 beast patterns are perfectly expressed in a person's body without conflict. There are really more and more interesting young people. It just so happens that we can announce the news of the Class 6-dimensional rift in a while. As soon as the neutral and calm voice fell, the eyes of the veteran factions and the top factions management generation immediately revealed extreme ecstasy. Chapter 886. As the leaders of the veteran factions and pinnacle factions, they were always thinking about how to develop their clan better and obtain more resources. A clan's military strength, operations, and expansion all required resources to support it. Therefore, apart from the veteran factions and pinnacle factions leaders who had the opportunity to become Radiance envoys or members of the Radiance Light Knights, the news of the Azure Federation's 4th Azure Envoy had been confirmed. The rest of the people treated it as a piece of news. However, the news of a Class 6-dimensional rift caused the hearts of all the veteran factions and pinnacle factions leaders to beat violently. If Class 1 to Class 5-dimensional rifts were used by dimensional lifeforms to attack the main world, then Spirit Chi professionals could enter the dimensional rift after killing the dimensional lifeforms that surged out. They could search for resources in the dimensional rift and obtain source-type items or even sacred source lifeforms from the dimensional hub. Class 6 dimensional rifts could be defined as the main world's invasion of the dimensional world. After Class 6 dimensional rifts appeared, there wouldn't be as many dimensional life forms as Class 1 to Class 5 dimensional rifts. However, the strength of the dimensional life forms that surged out was uncertain. Class 6 dimensional rifts were connected to the entire dimensional world. After a Class 6 dimensional rift opened, there would be a dimensional membrane inside the rift. Due to this dimensional membrane, the dimensional life forms in the dimensional world wouldn't feel the dimensional rift's suction force and wouldn't be able to see the dimensional rift. However, if they were to accidentally step into the dimensional rift, they would still be teleported to the main world. The strength of the life forms in the dimensional world wasn't fixed. There might be Class 1 dimensional life forms that were equivalent to Bronze phase or Class 10 dimensional life forms that were equivalent to Creation Breed phase. There was once a Class 6 dimensional rift in the Radiance Federation that was connected to the Abyss world. When the Class 6 dimensional rift opened, there happened to be 2 Class 10 demons that were equivalent to Creation Breed phase fighting. Fortunately, the Class 6 dimensional rift that connected to the Abyss world opened in the desolate Scorching Sun Desert. The Scorching Sun Desert was tens of thousands of kilometers away from the nearest inhabited city, Rolling Rock City. However, the battle between the 2 Class 10 demons still affected Rolling Rock City, which was tens of thousands of kilometers away. It even affected the Scorching Sun Desert's terrain. This caused the temperature of the Scorching Desert to soar. The entire central region was roasted into flowing lava. In the end, the Spirit Guard's Chief Guard Yi had personally arrived and taken in the 2 Class 10 demons that were equivalent to Creation Breed phase. Subsequently, Chief Guard Knight dispatched 20 envoys to seal the Class 6 dimensional rift while Chief Guard Knight personally led a team into the Abyss world. After killing all the demons within thousands of kilometers of the Abyss world's Class 6 dimensional rift, he ordered 20 guard envoys to station themselves within the Class 6 dimensional rift. They would prevent the abyssal demons from invading the origin world from the inside. Risks often coexisted with benefits. Class 6 dimensional rifts might be accompanied by unpredictable dangers, but compared to the rewards, these risks were nothing. A dimensional world connected to a Class 6 dimensional rift was a huge treasure trove. The resources in a dimensional world were far more abundant than those in the Abyss dimensional rifts. If one could go through a Class 6 dimensional rift to harvest resources in a dimensional world, it would be much easier. That way, he would be able to earn a lot of money very quickly, allowing his faction to develop to a higher level. Due to the special characteristics of Class 6 dimensional rifts, their existence was like a second world that was connected to the Radiance continent. One could establish a faction through the Class 6 dimensional rift and develop in the dimensional world. The Origin Worlds faction and the Dimensional Rifts faction would form a connection and continuously move the dimensional world's resources into the Origin world. Of course, in order to do so, one must have sufficient strength to support it. Furthermore, this Class 6 dimensional rift was an Abyss dimensional rift, and the abyssal demon's strength was not to be trifled with. Since the Class 6 Abyss dimensional rift was connected to the entire dimensional world, if a Class 6 Abyss dimensional rift was opened in the Federation of other continents, other Federation experts would also be able to enter the Abyss world through the Class 6 Abyss dimensional rift. It could be said that the Class 6 dimensional rift had given the various major federations a chance to compete for hegemony on the same stage. The veteran factions and the pinnacle factions management generation started to get excited. Based on Her Majesty's words, could it be that the Class 6 Abyss dimensional rift in the Rock Flow Desert that had been sealed for nearly a decade was going to be opened to the public? If that was the case, it was simply great news. Zhuo Ming, the left administrator, arrived at the inner palace of Night Dawn Palace. He quickly walked to Night Leaning Moon's ear and whispered a few words before standing behind her with his hands behind his back. At that moment, the Night Dawn Palace's bell rang again. Upon hearing the bell, Night Leaning Moon stood up and said, "It's time for the Nyx Assembly's official meeting." It's time for the Nyx Assembly's official meeting. Let's get ready to start the official meeting. As soon as Night Leaning Moon's voice fell, the spiritual power in her body suddenly circulated. The tide-like spiritual power poured into the dark crystal floor of Night Dawn Palace's inner palace. At the same time, an aura that was like the eternal night gushed out of Night Leaning Moon's body. Immediately after, the Veteran Factions Management Generation and the Pinnacle Factions Management Generation, as well as the Outer Palace's Youth Generation, suddenly realized that the walls and floor were rapidly changing shape as they were disassembled and pieced together. The entire Night Dawn Palace was like a mechanical palace that was being disassembled and pieced together. In just a moment, the Outer Palace and Inner Palace of Night Dawn Palace had fused together to form a giant auditorium. 13 chairs were placed around the auditorium, encircling the entire auditorium. Behind each chair, there were a few more seats. These seats were slightly shorter than the 13 chairs. The number of seats behind each chair was different. Some had more, some had fewer, and some didn't even have seats behind them. It was obvious that the number of seats had been carefully chosen. Many chairs had also appeared in the auditorium center. These chairs were slightly shorter than the seats behind the 13 chairs. There was a gap behind each chair, which was just enough for 1 or 2 people to stand in. In front of these chairs was a huge ceremonial platform. The design of the ceremonial platform was simple and crude, and it was completely inlaid with law crystals. The entire auditorium was burning with the top-notch exceptional flame, Sun's sacred flame. The changes in Night Dawn Palace's Outer Palace stunned the Veteran Factions Management Generation and the Pinnacle Factions Management Generation and the younger generation. The first was even more shocking. End of this chapter. Chapter 887. The Bamboo Monarch looked at the auditorium that was formed by the fusion of the outer and inner palaces. Qingyue, your ingenuity as a 5-star spirit craftsman is truly superb. Every time I see you, I want to invite you to my purple bamboo forest to transform my Xiangzhu pavilion. Night Leaning Moon glanced at the Bamboo Monarch with a strange expression. Isn't your residence in the purple bamboo forest called Purple Bamboo Pavilion? When did it change its name to Xiangzhu Pavilion? The Bamboo Monarch coughed and could not help but curse in his heart. With Night Leaning Moon's EQ, it's no wonder the Moon Empress didn't choose her as one of the Moon Envoys. She's just showing off her love and ingratiating herself with the beauty standing behind her. Night Leaning Moon can't even see this. Of course, the Bamboo Monarch would not say this out loud. If he did, he was afraid that Night Leaning Moon would immediately attack him. At that moment, those Veteran Factions and Pinnacle Factions Management Generation standing behind Night Leaning Moon suddenly realized that Chief Guard Yi was actually a Class 5 spirit craftsman. This was the first time they had heard of this news. There were far more Class 5 spirit craftsmen in the Radiance Federation than Class 5 creation masters. After a rough calculation, there should be at least 100 Pinnacle Class 4 creation masters. They had also looked for Class 5 creation masters to help them produce items. However, ordinary Class 5 spirit craftsmen definitely did not have the ability to use ingenious means to build the entire palace like Chief Guard Yi. Spirit craftsmen were the same as creation masters. After reaching Class 5, there were no grades. However, just by looking at this Night Independence Palace, it was obvious that Chief Guard Ye's spirit craftsman strength was definitely far superior to ordinary Class 5 spirit craftsmen. At that moment, the aura that was like the eternal night suddenly shrank, and the majestic aura was withdrawn into Night Leaning Moon's body. At that moment, a mark appeared on the back of the 13 chairs, including those placed in the center of the auditorium. The mark on the 13 chairs was the crown pattern of the 13 majesties, while the mark on the back of the seats in the center area represented the various Veteran Factions and Pinnacle Factions family imprints. As the organizer of the Nyx Assembly, Night Leaning Moon appeared on the stage in a flash and said in a cold voice, "Everyone, the Nyx Assembly's main meeting has begun. Everyone, the main meeting of the Nyx Assembly has begun. Take your seats." After saying that, Night Leaning Moon flashed to her seat again. Cicada Cry first placed the phone in his hand on the chair it belonged to, and then returned to his own chair in a flash. As the 13 majesties took their seats, the leaders of the veteran forces and the top forces also took their seats according to the marks on the back of the chairs in the central area. the younger generation came to stand behind their elders. Zhong Zhe, Gu Lang, Li Zhonglin, Zhang Yingying, Xiachen, Wang Fuxiang, and the others sat on the seats reserved for them. It didn't take long for him to finish sitting down. Song Yu, the left minister, and Zhou Ming stood behind the chairs, standing ramrod straight like guards. At this moment, the leaders of the peak and veteran forces, as well as the youngsters standing behind their elders, keenly noticed that the seats reserved behind the other high lords were already occupied. Only the seats behind Chief Guard Yi and the Moon Empress were empty. At that moment, only Lu Jie, who had just won the martial duel championship, and Lin Yuan, who had won the civil and martial duel championship, were not present in the entire Nix assembly. This made many people who had guessed Lin Yuan's identity confirm his identity. It also made those who didn't know Lin Yuan's identity suddenly have a shocking guess. At this moment, four people walked out from the only corridor in the entire auditorium. When they saw these 4 people, not only were the leaders of the veteran forces and the top forces stunned, but even the 11 majesties apart from the Moon Empress and Chief Guard Yi were also stunned. Their eyes scanned the Moon Empress and Night-leaning Moon, as well as a youth walking at the front of the corridor. At that moment, a voice suddenly echoed in the central area. "Damn, why is Lin Yuan wearing the majesties?" The majesties. Before Gao Feng could finish speaking, he immediately realized that he had said something wrong. Gao Feng secretly glanced forward and found that his father was indeed glaring at him. Gao Pei's glare immediately made Gao Feng shiver. However, Gao Feng immediately noticed that the corners of his father's mouth were curling up from time to time, and his cheeks were also twitching slightly. It was as though his face was stiff from smiling. Gao Feng thought to himself, "Why is my father's expression so strange?" Gao Feng was just about to ask his father what was wrong when he realized that he was being lifted up by a ball of gentle spiritual power that was like a cool breeze. By the time Gao Feng came back to his senses, he found himself standing in front of a man with eyes full of smiles. This man was wearing a simple and elegant green majesties that were covered with a thin layer of cicada wing patterns. The cicada wing patterns overlapped and had an indescribable elegance. The 2 sides of the majesties were woven with an unknown crystalline silk thread to form 2 towering giant trees. The giant trees were embroidered with silver silk beads and a few cicadas. Just looking at these cicadas, Gao Feng felt his heart suddenly calm down, and his ears seemed to be ringing with the clear chirping of Zen insects. However, Gao Feng immediately reacted. Wasn't this person in front of him one of the 13 majesties who stayed in the imperial court for a long time, His Majesty Cicada Cry? Gao Feng was shocked and didn't know why His Majesty Cicada Cry called him in front of him. Could it be that His Majesty Cicada Cry was unhappy because of his careless mouth? Was His Majesty Cicada Cry going to personally punish him? Gao Feng remembered his father saying that among the 13 majesties, His Majesty Cicada Cry was always smiling and looked the easiest to approach. However, in reality, His Majesty Cicada Cry was the most difficult to approach among the 13 majesties. The 13 majesties always had their own responsibilities. For example, Bureau Chief Yi was in charge of the Spirit Guard, and Space-Time Elder was in charge of Ostrich Logistics. Every majesty had a special right and a specific duty. His Majesty Cicada Cry's responsibility was to be the city lord of the 36 big cities in the imperial court. It could be said that the city lords of the 36 big cities were His Majesty Cicada Cry's subordinates. One word from His Majesty Cicada Cry could decide the appointment or dismissal of the city lords. Moreover, the veteran forces and top forces were deeply rooted in the 36 major cities. Therefore, no veteran or top force dared to not respect His Majesty Cicada Cry, who indirectly ruled the 36 big cities. Just as Gao Feng was feeling nervous, he heard His Majesty Cicada Cry in front of him speak softly. "Little guy, I know you're called Gao Feng. Don't be nervous." Then, Gao Feng saw His Majesty Cicada Cry in front of him stand up and speak to Bureau Chief Yi in a clear voice. "Bureau Chief Yi, give this seat to this seat's disciple. Your disciples are all sitting, I can't let this seat's disciple stand." The second was even more. End of this chapter. Chapter 888. Cicada Cry's words made Gao Feng's expression immediately turn sluggish. Gao Feng subconsciously stretched out his left pinky to pick his ear, thinking that he had heard wrongly. However, when he thought that he was standing in front of Cicada Cry, it was too rude to reach out and pick his ear. Cicada Cry saw Gao Feng's action and reached out to touch Gao Feng's slightly wrinkled collar. "What? You're not willing to be my disciple?" Gao Feng immediately woke up from his sluggish state. Gao Feng was not stupid. He would not refuse Cicada Cry's public acceptance of a disciple even if he was beaten to death. However, Gao Feng did not understand why Cicada Cry would want to accept him as a disciple. In short, it was impossible for Cicada Cry to accept him as a disciple because of his father. Even his grandfather did not have such great capabilities. The gears in Gao Feng's head began to spin, and he immediately realized that the reason why His Holiness Cicada Cry had accepted him as a disciple was probably because of the strength he had displayed in the combat arena. Only this explanation could explain it clearly. As for his contracted breeze hibiscus and spirit spring lily, they would definitely not be favored by His Majesty Cicada Cry. The only thing that Cicada Cry had taken a fancy to was the yellow spring lily, which he had always treated as a trump card and had not even told his father. When Gao Feng had seen the yellow spring lily, he had immediately decided to use resources like the island whale and the elemental shellfish to exchange for it. This was enough to prove the yellow spring lily's preciousness. Moreover, when Gao Feng had promoted the yellow spring lily to a fantasy breed, he had been exceptionally surprised to see the exclusive skill. At the thought of this, Gao Feng could not help but feel grateful to Lin Yuan. Although he had exchanged for the yellow spring lily with resources during the transaction, if Lin Yuan had not taken it out, he would not have had such a chance today. It could be said that Lin Yuan had unknowingly given him a life-changing chance. It could be said that Lin Yuan had imperceptibly given him a life-changing chance. Lin Yuan was really his benefactor. While Gao Feng was thinking in his mind, he did not speak carelessly and hurriedly nodded. "Yes, I'm willing." Night Leaning Moon frowned slightly when she heard Cicada Cry's words, and her face faintly revealed a displeased expression. This Nix conference was a grand event for her and Moonside to announce their disciples. Cicada Cry's sudden acceptance of Gao Feng as a disciple was a little too much in Night Leaning Moon's opinion. Night Leaning Moon knew that Cicada Cry intended to take Gao Feng as his disciple, and thought that Cicada Cry would contact the Gao family in private after the Great Nix Assembly ended. He did not expect Cicada Cry to announce Gao Feng's identity in such a way. However, even though Night Leaning Moon was displeased, she still poured her spiritual energy into her feet. The ground behind Cicada's chair changed, and a chair grew out of the ground. Cicada Cry pulled Gao Feng to sit on the chair that suddenly grew out, and then returned to his own chair. He had only just accepted Gao Feng as his disciple, yet he was already acting so meticulously. Iron Prison could not help but feel envious when he saw Cicada Cry accepting disciples. However, the performance of the younger generation in the martial arena was really not that good. The civil and martial duels did not give the younger generation, apart from Lin Yuan and Zhong Zhe, a chance to display their combat strength. After looking around, apart from Lin Yuan, Zhong Zhe, and Lu Jia, Iron Prison did not fancy anyone else. Du Shua might have used his fei to fight with Lu Jia, but Iron Prison had not taken a fancy to Du Shua. He felt that Du Shua's contracted fei might be powerful, but it did not form a system, and there was nothing eye-catching about it. Gao Feng's mind was still a little dazed as he sat on the chair. However, he was more excited than dazed. Originally, Gao Feng felt that he was very lucky because Lu Jie had obtained second place in the martial arena. Now that he had become His Holiness Cicada Cry's disciple, it could no longer be described as just lucky. Gao Pei's face was smiling like a big chrysanthemum, and he straightened his neck and prepared to endure the envious gazes from all directions. However, because Cicada Cry had the intention to accept Gao Feng as a disciple, the veteran factions and the top factions management generation were already aware of it. After the younger generation was done being jealous of Gao Feng, their eyes firmly landed on the youth that were striding over on the long corridor. When they saw the youth's attire, they could not help but feel a shock that reached the depths of their souls. The youth were wearing the same imperial robes as the Moon Empress and Chief Guard Yi. After a slight separation, they realized that the youth's imperial robes were different from the Moon Empress and Chief Guard Ye's imperial robes. Although Lu Jie, who had changed into the imperial robes, was still wearing the Spirit Guard standard mask, Lu Jie and Lin Yuan's aura were very outstanding. The gorgeous and dignified imperial robes paired with the two elegant young masters made it hard for people not to look at them. However, be it the veteran factions management generation or the younger generation, none of them dared to imagine how much the Moon Empress and Chief Guard Yi doted on their disciples. That was why they would make such clothes according to their own imperial robes. Even if other His Holiness accepted disciples, they had never heard of any His Holiness replicating their imperial robes for their juniors to wear. When the youth walked out of the long corridor with the imperial robes, they suddenly gave off a feeling that they were unreachable and distant. The Moon Empress and Night-leaning Moon circulated the spiritual power in their bodies at the same time, and two masses of spiritual power simultaneously lifted Lin Yuan and Lu Jie to their sides. The Moon Empress reached out her hand to help Lin Yuan adjust the pearl collar on his neck and said, "I personally sewed this robe 2 months ago. This dress was personally sewn by me 2 months ago. Now that I look at it, it suits you quite well. However, you are only 19 years old. You can still grow taller. When you grow taller, I will help you change it." Lin Yuan looked at the Moon Empress and suddenly felt that this seemingly heavy but abnormally light lunar imperial robe had an indescribable warmth. Lin Yuan revealed a bright smile and said, "Master, I will work hard to grow taller." Upon hearing that, the Moon Empress suddenly felt that Lin Yuan, who had always been mature, had a trace of childishness. The Moon Empress cherished Lin Yuan's rare childishness and unconsciously revealed a warm smile. The Moon Empress cherished Lin Yuan's rare childishness very much and unconsciously revealed a warm smile. When everyone saw the interaction between the Moon Empress and Lin Yuan, their jaws almost dropped to the ground. Just by looking at the lunar imperial robe that Lin Yuan was wearing, it was enough to see how much the Moon Empress doted on him. However, they did not expect the usually cold Moon Empress to have such a gentle side in front of Lin Yuan. At that moment, everyone present was waiting for the official start of the Nix assembly. However, there was a dumbfounded person standing behind an empty chair. This person was Zheng Kaiyuan. As one of the 3 veteran factions in Indigo Azure City, the Zheng family was not qualified to participate in a grand event like the Nix assembly. Zheng Kaiyuan had appeared at the Nix assembly because his master, Miao Qi, had brought him along. Since something had happened to Miao Zhuo, Zheng Kaiyuan had wanted to use the Nix assembly's official start to inform his master, Miao Zhi. However, Zheng Kaiyuan realized that not only had Miao Zhuo been thrown out by Zhuo Ming, but even his master, Miao Qi, was no longer in the Nix assembly. Zheng Kaiyuan had originally been happy that he had mixed into Lin Yuan's circle. However, there was only one question in Zheng Kaiyuan's mind now. Where had his master gone? The anesthetic effect had worn off today, and it was very painful. He had been holed up in bed with his cell phone for the entire day. Sob, sob, sob. Button was not good at using a cell phone to type word by word. It was still more convenient to type on a computer. His thoughts kept getting interrupted in the ward, so he might not write very well. He had already tried his best to correct it. Tomorrow I will continue to use my cell phone to type. I hope to go home early. Good night, everyone. End of this chapter. Chapter 889. As a direct descendant of a veteran faction, Zheng Kaiyuan was not a fool. Moreover, Zheng Kaiyuan had been with Miao Qi for so many years and had received resources from top-notch factions. He had received the same education as the direct descendants of top-notch factions. His horizons had always been higher than those of veteran factions. Based on the current situation, Zheng Kaiyuan quickly deduced that his master, Miao Qi, must have encountered some trouble in Yeyang Palace. It was likely that he had offended someone he could not afford to offend and was forced to leave Yeyang Palace. If Miao Qi had left Yeyang Palace because of something, it was impossible for him not to tell him before leaving. However, Zheng Kaiyuan could not figure out what his master, Miao Qi, had encountered in Yeyang Palace no matter how hard he thought about it. The seats in the core area of the auditorium were not too far apart. Miao Zhuo was standing in the area where the Miao family's beast creation garden was located. The area next to it was the top-notch faction, the four-legged beast region. Normally, Zheng Kaiyuan would not dare to rashly ask the Fang family's elders about the top-notch faction, the four-legged beast region. Even though he was standing in the beast creation garden, Zheng Kaiyuan still knew that his surname was Zheng and not Miao. However, when he thought about how he was standing in the circle of the Moon Empress, Chief Guard Yi, Bamboo Monarch, and Chef Supreme's disciples, Zheng Kaiyuan could not help but muster up his courage. Zheng Kaiyuan took 2 steps toward the old man of the Fang family and coughed lightly. "Senior Fang, I wonder where my master, Miao Qi, has gone?" Zheng Kaiyuan purposely emphasized the word master as if to emphasize his identity. The current family head of the four-legged beast region, Fang Zhan, was rather curious when he saw a hesitant young man walking toward him. As Zheng Kaiyuan had been facing Fang Zhan from the side, Fang Zhan did not see the family mark on Zheng Kaiyuan's collar. Moreover, Zheng Kaiyuan's spirit chi clothes were not like Miao Zhuo's iconic 100-beast new Miao suit, so he could be recognized at a glance. Therefore, Fang Zhan did not immediately recognize Zheng Kaiyuan. However, when Fang Zhan heard Zheng Kaiyuan reveal his identity, he looked at Zheng Kaiyuan with a strange expression. Fang Zhan had just heard from his grandson, Fang He, about the trouble Miao Zhuo had caused in the outer palace of Yeyang Palace. This made Fang Zhan reconsider whether to cooperate with the Miao family. On the other hand, he couldn't help but vent his anger on the Miao family's Beast Creation Institute. His grandson had almost been punished by the left custodians Wu Ming because of Miao Zhuo's involvement. It was all thanks to the magnanimity of Bureau Chief Ye's disciple. The Miao family's Beast Creation Gardens, old and young, were really troublemakers. Just as Fang Zhan was about to reprimand Zheng Kaiyuan, he heard Fang He bend over and whisper something into his ear. These words caused Fang Zhan's gaze to change as he looked at Zheng Kaiyuan, and his tone became much more polite. "Your master, Miao Qi, is wearing a spirit chi outfit that coincides with the Bamboo Monarch's crown pattern, which is equivalent to offending the Bamboo Monarch. I was just chased out of the Great Nix Assembly by the Right Minister in the Inner Palace." As for the specific details, Fang Zhan didn't dare to go into detail. After living for so long, Fang Zhan understood the principle that trouble came from the mouth. This matter was related to the Bamboo Monarch's private affairs, so it would be wrong to say it. After carefully scrutinizing Zheng Kaiyuan for a while, Fang Zhan truly didn't find anything special about him. If there was really anything special about him, Zheng Kaiyuan should have participated in the civil, martial, or both civil and martial competitions. Fang Zhan couldn't see what qualifications this veteran faction's disciple had to stand in that circle. Upon hearing Fang Zhan's words, Zheng Kaiyuan was dumbstruck. He felt that the surrounding air had turned cold. Not only had Miao Zhuo offended the Moon Empress disciple, but he had also been chased out by her disciple, whose soul and talent had been damaged. Even his own master, Miao Qi, had offended the Bamboo Monarch because of the crown pattern. It must be known that offending the High Holiness was a very disrespectful act. His master, Miao Qi's status in the Beast Creation Garden might plummet because of this matter. By then, he would not be able to enjoy his current treatment. At the thought of this, Miao Zhuo felt his legs go weak, and his entire body was on the verge of collapsing. At that moment, Zheng Kaiyuan suddenly heard Fang Zhan speak. "I heard that you have a personal relationship with the High Holiness disciple. If you want to help your master, you can go and plead with the High Holiness disciple. I'm afraid old man Miao is worrying about how to get on the High Holiness's good side to express his apology." When Zheng Kaiyuan heard Fang Zhan's words, his tottering body suddenly straightened, and his legs were filled with strength. It could be said that Fang Zhan's words had opened the door to a new world for Zheng Kaiyuan. Zheng Kaiyuan was still a little confused when Lin Yuan had called him over. He did not understand why Lin Yuan had been so enthusiastic toward him. After he had joined that small group, he had not dared to speak to the other High Holiness disciple and was not familiar with the Bamboo Monarch's disciple, Gu Lang. Zheng Kaiyuan was not naive enough to think that his pleading would be useful. However, everyone had seen Lin Yuan's attitude toward him earlier. Lin Yuan had also revealed his identity as the Moon Empress disciple. He could use Lin Yuan's tiger skin, and not only would he not be implicated when he returned, but he might even receive a meeting with his grandfather, who had always disliked him. He might even receive an audience with his grandfather, who had always disliked him. At that time, his status in the Miao family would definitely rise as well. Even without Miao Qi, he would definitely be doing well. Lin Yuan had just left his phone number, and he could indeed help the Miao family contact Lin Yuan. At that thought, Zheng Kaiyuan looked at the chair engraved with the Miao family's mark on the back of the chair and could not help but have an ambition. While hesitating, his ambition won over his timidity. Zheng Kaiyuan walked to the chair and sat down. Lin Yuan had been watching Zheng Kaiyuan's actions, and his fingers gently tapped on the chair's armrest. Zheng Kaiyuan is really good bait. Lin Yuan had been thinking about how to guide Zheng Kaiyuan a second time, but it seemed that it was no longer necessary. Next, Lin Yuan only needed to spread the net and wait for Zheng Kaiyuan, the good bait, to lure the big fish that was the Miao family over. The Nix assembly was ongoing, and Lin Yuan had never liked such grand and restrained occasions. Lin Yuan sat on the chair and stared at the ceremonial platform inlaid with complete law crystals like a miser. At the same time, he constantly appeased the chattering princess in the depths of his soul. The law crystals on the ceremonial platform are not ours, so you can't absorb them later. When the princess heard Lin Yuan's words, she immediately became disappointed. Lin Yuan sensed her disappointment and hurriedly said, "Don't you still have a lot of law origin crystals? Don't you still have a lot of law origin crystals? I remember that you should prefer to absorb law origin crystals than law crystals. I remember that you should prefer to absorb law origin crystals than law crystals." Chapter 890. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, the princess said aggrievedly, "Master, I used to eat law origin crystals every day. Master, I used to eat law origin crystals every day. Isn't it normal for me to want to change my taste? Besides, I'm afraid that if I keep absorbing law origin crystals like this, I'll starve when they're finished." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan immediately knew that the princess had such an idea because she had not eaten for a period of time. Now that she had law origin crystals to eat every day, she began to be wary of danger in times of peace and wanted to save some surplus food. Lin Yuan said to the princess with some amusement, "Don't worry. Even if I can't guarantee that you'll always absorb law origin crystals at this speed, it won't be a problem to have them to eat every day. Also, if you want to eat law crystals in the future, there will be plenty of them." The previous duel with Zhong Zhe had made Lin Yuan clear about the princess' strength, so he planned to spare no effort in nurturing her. Whether it was using the princess dress to inscribe laws to increase his resistance or transforming the complete laws into a world of laws, they could all increase Lin Yuan's strength. Lin Yuan still had a lot of law origin crystals, and he should be able to use them to promote another Myth 3 law into a world of laws. Among the 3 complete Myth 3 laws that Lin Yuan now had, the Ice Flame law increased his resistance to ice and fire, while the Vicious Poison law increased his resistance to poison. The Remnant Dream law increased his resistance to darkness and spiritual energy. Although the Remnant Dream law was a darkness-type law, it focused on attacking the dreamland. Dream attack was a special kind of spiritual attack. With Genius and the Dark Death world, Lin Yuan no longer needed the Remnant Dream law to increase his resistance to darkness and spiritual energy. Therefore, even if he had more law origin crystals in the future, he did not intend to promote the Remnant Dream law into the Remnant Dream world. As for the Vicious Poison law and the Ice Flame law, Lin Yuan was a little hesitant. In the battle with Zhong Zhe, the Ice Flame law had made a great contribution. If it was promoted to the Ice Flame world, then Lin Yuan would no longer need to activate the Jasmine Lily's exclusive skill, Life Imprint, when facing Zhong Zhe. Lin Yuan himself would no longer be affected by the Burning Sky Centipede's exclusive skill, Fire Fantasy Country. Raising the Vicious Poison law to Creation Breed could greatly enhance his poison resistance and even give him the chance to be immune to the attacks of Myth Breed Poison-type phase. Not only were poison-type Fays able to use poison-type abilities, but many plant-type Fays also possess toxins. He was going to train in the Divine Wood Federation next, so it seemed that it would be more useful to upgrade the Vicious Poison Law to the Vicious Poison World. At the Myth Breed level, poison-type Fays were becoming increasingly rare. However, Myth Breed poison-type Fays were extremely powerful, causing many sane-grade Fays to tremble in fear. Presumably, after the Vicious Poison rule in the body of the Jade-Scaled Sky-Swallowing Python advanced into the Vicious Poison world, it would also provide him with a sword technique that focused on poison attacks. During the battle just now, Lin Yuan had not summoned any of Black's Fays, so Black's identity had not been exposed. Lin Yuan had imperceptibly separated his combat ability. In Lin Yuan's opinion, this kind of separation was beneficial. Black's identity could allow him to continue to hone his Fey combat cooperation on Star Web and participate in the Radiance 100 sequence test with this identity. With the Radiant Light Metal, Lin Yuan was a big step ahead of others on the Radiance Envoy path. It would not be too late to combine his two identities when the Radiance Envoys were officially selected 2 years later. Suddenly, Mystic Moon's voice pulled Lin Yuan back from his thoughts. Your Highness, although the Nyx Assembly's main theme has already begun, it shouldn't end in less than 2 hours. If your Highness feels bored, I have some snacks here to help you pass the time. After saying that, Xian Yu waved her hand and took out several glass jars. These glass jars contained all sorts of diamond-rank spirit fruits. These diamond-rank spirit fruits had been soaked in the silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar after they were dried. After absorbing a sufficient amount of silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar, the dried fruits became crystal clear and looked quite appetizing. However, Lin Yuan hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Don't worry. I've already eaten a lot before the civil and martial duel started. I'm not hungry at all now." Perhaps due to the influence of his previous life, Lin Yuan felt that it was a little strange to eat in such an occasion. When Mystic Moon saw that Lin Yuan wasn't eating, she handed the jars in her hand to Cold Moon. Cold Moon took one of the jars and touched it with her fingertip. An ice needle immediately formed on her fingernail. Cold Moon used the ice needle to prick the candied fruit in the jar and put it in her mouth before eating it with relish. Lin Yuan looked toward the center of the auditorium and found that Night Leaning Moon was standing on the stage again at some point in time. The veteran factions and the top factions management generation had a hint of eagerness, excitement in their eyes. Lin Yuan thought that these veteran factions and the top factions management generation should know what the main meeting was about. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so excited. Just as Lin Yuan was guessing, he heard Night Leaning Moon's clear voice. Apart from the Moon Empress and I accepting a disciple and wanting to see the strength of the younger generation, there is another important matter for the Nyx Assembly to be held this time. The Class 6 Abyss Dimensional Rift in the Burning Flame Desert has been reinforced and stabilized at a great cost. The Class 6 Abyss Dimensional Rift in the Burning Desert has now been refined into a permanent portal that connects to the Abyss world. Upon hearing Night Leaning Moon's words, the veteran factions and the top factions management generation's eyes became even more fervent. Night Leaning Moon's words also startled Lin Yuan slightly. Previously, Lin Yuan had only heard of Class 1 to Class 5 dimensional rifts. This was the first time he had heard of a Class 6 dimensional rift. When the Moon Empress saw Lin Yuan's doubtful expression, she explained to him. After the Moon Empress explanation, Lin Yuan immediately knew what exactly was going on with a Class 6 dimensional rift. It turned out that once a dimensional rift reached Class 6, it would become a portal that connected the origin world to another dimensional world. In this case, as long as the origin world had enough strength, it could continuously mine the dimensional world's resources. This was a good thing for the origin world. In Lin Yuan's opinion, the fact that the Class 6 dimensional rift in the Radiance Federation's territory was an abyss dimensional rift should be considered lucky. Among the 5 dimensional worlds that were connected to the 5 major dimensional rifts, the water dimensional world was the hardest to mine. Chapter 891. Even if Spirit Chi professionals could rely on some special phase to breathe underwater, this underwater breathing ability was ultimately limited. The water world was filled with boundless seawater and massive water world dimensional life forms that swam in the seawater. Spirit chi professionals could not go too far in the water world. Without the oxygen supply, even the strongest spirit chi professional would be permanently left in the water world. The bodies of the water world dimensional life forms were trash to spirit chi professionals and had no value at all. If the bodies of the water world dimensional life forms were taken out of the water world, it would instead become the burden of the spirit chi professionals. When the bodies of the water world dimensional life forms were exposed to the air, the stench that would erupt from them was not something that ordinary people could tolerate. As for the underground world, it was much stronger than the water world. After all, the underground world was rich in a large number of metallic spiritual materials, which could be used to manufacture all kinds of items and also to nurture phase. It could be said that the metallic spiritual materials produced in the underground world were extremely useful to spirit chi professionals. However, the exploration of the underground world was not much more difficult than the exploration of the water world. The underground environment was really not very friendly to spirit chi professionals. In order to explore the underground world, one would need to contract a fae that could illuminate, which was equivalent to a waste of talent for many people. Moreover, the dangers in the underground world were not only limited to dimensional life forms, but also often accompanied by earthquakes and landslides. Once there were earthquakes and landslides, spirit chi professionals exploring the depths of the underground world would have almost no chance of survival. The abyss world and the alien insect world were much less dangerous than the water world and the underground world. If the two were to be compared in detail, the abyss world was more suitable for spirit chi professionals to develop inside. Although the abyss demons were individually strong, they won in numbers. Spirit chi professional squads could defeat the abyss demons one by one, but even if they could easily kill a single unit in the face of a sea of alien insects, the endless sea of insects could easily make people lose their fighting spirit. The abyss world could produce strange flames, which were a necessary resource for many lifestyle class spirit chi professionals. A large number of strange flames from the abyss world into the main world could greatly promote the development of lifestyle class spirit chi professionals. Of course, the alien insect world also had some rare resources that were comparable to strange flames. However, the value of the alien insect body was far lower than that of the abyss demon's body. The abyss demon's body could be decomposed into some spiritual materials, which were rather useful to creation masters. This made abyssal demons the dimensional creatures with the highest average value among all the dimensional creatures. However, in his opinion, the most suitable dimensional world for human exploration was still the swamp world, which had always been relatively rare. The environment of the swamp world was no different from that of the main world. Although the swamp world was called the swamp world, the area of the swamp dimensional world was less than 60%. The remaining 40% was all land. Compared to the main world, the swamp world was equivalent to the main world's land being broken up and divided into small islands scattered across the sea. After that, he would turn the seas of the origin world into swamps. The life forms in the swamp world basically had amphibious life forms, but the swamp contained a large amount of earth elements. When spirit chi professionals arrived in the swamp world, they could use earth-type phase to extract the earth elements from the swamp. With a large amount of pure earth elemental essence, the broken pieces of land were connected together to form a large continent. Although the swamp world was humid, it was very suitable for raising amphibious and reptilian phase, insect species phase, and plant species phase that liked it. Although most of the dimensional life forms in the swamp dimensional rift were comparable in value to the water world dimensional life forms, a small number of swamp dimensional life forms like Medusa were shockingly valuable. Just as Lin Yuan was pondering, Night Leaning Moon, who was standing on the ceremonial platform, spoke again. The Class 6 Abyss Dimensional Rift in the Burning Flame Desert can now be opened to the veteran factions and pinnacle factions. However, the resources needed to maintain the opening of the Class 6 Abyss Dimensional Rift will need to be jointly provided by all the major factions that are preparing to enter the Abyss world through the Class 6 Abyss Dimensional Rift. Factions that enter the Abyss world through the Class 6 Abyss Dimensional Rift will have to pay 10 mid-grade strange flames a day. When Night-Leaning Moon finished speaking, Lin Yuan could clearly see the fanatical faces of the leaders of the top factions and veteran factions present, filled with determination to win. They were obviously planning to develop in the Abyss world through the Class 6 Abyss Dimensional Rift. Compared to the development gains in the Abyss world, the price of 10 mid-level exceptional flames a day was almost negligible. Based on this calculation, the price for a faction to develop in the Abyss world for a month was only 300 mid-level exceptional flames. 300 mid-level exceptional flames might seem like a lot, but as long as a faction had enough manpower, it was very easy to find them in the Abyss world, which was full of exceptional flames. The Radiance Federation's major factions had now developed to a flourishing level. If they continued to develop, it would inevitably increase the friction between the major factions due to the benefits. The opening of the Abyss world was tantamount to giving the various flourishing factions another platform to seek development. The Abyss world was much larger than the main world. Just as Lin Yuan was thinking about whether Sky City should also develop in the Abyss world, Genius, which was connected to Lin Yuan's spiritual energy, spoke to him through spiritual energy. Lin Yuan, your cell phone in the Spirit Lock spatial zone has been ringing for 5 minutes. There have been 7 or 8 phone calls in total. Is there something urgent? Lin Yuan hurriedly summoned his cell phone out of the Spirit Lock spatial zone. When he looked at the caller ID, he realized that these calls were from the mother of Bloodbath. At that moment, Lin Yuan did not want to pick up the call, but when he saw that the caller was the mother of Bloodbath, his pupils shrank. A bad premonition suddenly rose in his heart. The mother of Bloodbath had previously seen him and Lu Jie participate in the Dark Knight Assembly, so it would definitely not look for him now. Moreover, this was the time when Endless Summer could become a creation breed at any time. With that thought in mind, Lin Yuan hurriedly picked up the call. If a myth breed Fae wanted to transform into a creation breed Fae, they needed to go through the creation tribulation, which was not a joke. Lin Yuan took the phone and heard the mother of Bloodbath, who had always been calm on the other end of the line, actually crying. Lin Yuan, Big Sister Xia is now in the wilderness 3,000 kilometers away from the royal capital, preparing to endure the creation tribulation. Although Big Sister Xia used law crystals that contain pure power of law to strengthen the Enlightenment Law, the Enlightenment Law's improvement is far more solid than other myth breed Faes. However, Big Sister Xia was seriously injured when the first creation tribulation struck. I'm afraid she won't be able to withstand the next 2. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.